It's 2002 and your parents bring you to GameStop to pick out a new game for your birthday. A game by the name of Star Fox Adventures catches your eye. However, this isn't like the other Star Fox games you've seen. Fox wields a staff and fights against evil dinosaurs in melee combat. You collect treasures, obtain upgrades, navigate dungeons, and meet new friends on your journey to save the planet. Interestingly, this was never meant to be a Star Fox game. In fact, it was developed by Rare and it was originally called Dinosaur Planet, where you would play as Crystal the Fox and Saber the Wolf, taking place in a 3D Zelda-like world. However, as part of a publishing agreement with Nintendo, this game was reimagined in the Star Fox universe. Many believe that this was a bad creative decision, but I'm not here to talk about that. The result of this strange fusion is a game that many would hold in their hearts with a strong sense of nostalgia, although few of us would ever actually beat the game. This is because Star Fox Adventures is long and challenging. The world is absolutely massive and easy to get lost in. Many of us played for weeks and barely cleared 30% of the content. This begs the question, how fast could somebody actually beat it? And if you're familiar with speedrunning, you know that speedruns are not just defined by the runners, but the insane glitches and tricks they use to go faster. Over 20 years after this game was released, it would end up becoming one of the most broken and glitchy speedruns of all time. This is the history of Star Fox Adventures. Before we get into the runs, glitches, and sequence breaks, we need a foundation for what the intended sequence actually is. This game has arguably the most agonizing intro of any speedrun. We start off with a lengthy cutscene, then we do a basic shooting minigame, after which we watch another cutscene. Then we board the ship, talk to an NPC to open up the interior, and descend to grab a golden key. After leaving, we watch yet another cutscene, then get booted off the ship and land in Krazoa Palace. Here, we use that key to open a door, grab an explosive barrel, bomb some doors to progress through a linear level, and watch yet another cutscene. Afterwards, a door opens revealing the warp pad to the first Krazoa shrine. We warp inside and solve a series of linear, simple puzzles. Once we collect the first Krazoa spirit, we get warped out and watch yet another cutscene. From here, we deposit the Krazoa spirit, which triggers a cutscene of Crystal, followed by a cutscene of Fox in space, an auto-scroller, and you guessed it, another cutscene. Of the first 20 minutes of this run, 14 of those minutes are cutscenes, 2 minutes are auto-scrollers, and the rest is just walking and solving basic puzzles. To summarize, during the sequence we collect and place Krazoa Spirit 1, which is considered the intro of the game. Once we finish the intro, we play as Fox from here on out. Since we're learning about the fastest way to complete a run, it's helpful to understand what completing it actually means. So let's take a look at the outro. Near the end of the run, we collect the 5th Krazoa Spirit and fly our R-Wing to Krazoa Palace. We then descend into the palace, where turning in the 5th Krazoa Spirit opens a cage at the top of the palace. We save warp back to the top because it's faster than running, and enter the now opened cage containing the portal to the 6th Krazoa Shrine. We then walk to the center platform, which triggers a couple cutscenes with general scales, after which we gain the 6th and final Krazoa Spirit. Turning in this spirit triggers the Andross fight, and the run ends when dealing the final killing blow to Andross. In other words, collecting and placing Krazoa Spirits 5 and 6 is considered the outro of the game. As I'm sure you've guessed, there are 6 Krazoa Spirits in total. Throughout the run, we also return to Krazoa Palace to turn in K2, K3, and K4. The Krazoa Spirits are primarily scattered throughout Dinosaur Planet, where we must go to collect them. In fact, Dinosaur Planet is breaking apart, with 4 large chunks of the planet floating in space. Each of these is a dungeon. The first dungeon is Dark Ice Mines, the second dungeon is Cloud Runner Fortress, the third is Walled City, and the 4th is Dragon Rock. You may be thinking, surely we collect the Krazoa Spirits from the dungeons. Well, no. The dungeons are where we go to collect spell stones. That's right, we have even more major items to collect. The sheer complexity of the collectibles in this game is what made it so challenging as a kid. In total, there are 4 spell stones, and we actually alternate between collecting Krazoa Spirits and spell stones. Spell stones 1 and 3 are turned in at Volcano Force Point Temple, and spell stones 2 and 4 are turned in at Ocean Ocean Force Point Temple. What's amazing about Star Fox Adventures is that it's actually an open-world game. Dinosaur Planet is a massive world of interconnected maps, and it's actually possible to travel from one end to the other without encountering a loading screen. This is deeply impressive for a game released in 2002. There are still a few maps that aren't entirely connected, notably Krazoa Palace, the shrines, and the 4 dungeons. These can only be accessed by warping to them or flying to them in the R-Wing. To access these dungeons, we are required to spend fuel cells, with each dungeon being more expensive than the previous. Dark Ice Mines cost 5 fuel cells, Cloud Runner Fortress cost 10 fuel cells, Walled City cost 12 fuel cells, and Dragon Rock costs 15 fuel cells. In total, we need to collect 42 of the 75 fuel cells from Dinosaur Planet throughout the run. Obviously, we optimize the route to only grab the most convenient ones. The shopkeeper technically sells fuel cells too, but it's too slow, so we never do it. Additionally, each dungeon is locked until we free its corresponding gatekeeper on Dinosaur Planet. Throughout the run, there are a ton of other minor items and abilities that we obtain, but we will cover these as needed when we get to them. Without further ado, let's get into the first runs of this game. Like most games from this time, the speedrun history can be traced back to super old posts from Speed Demo's archive. Technology from this era made it really hard to record continuous runs, so these runs were segmented. Instead of using real time to measure runs, speedrunners used the in-game clock time. As a result, save quits were abused heavily. In today's runs, save quits are less common because it takes 20 seconds to get back into the game. It's also worth noting that pausing doesn't count towards the in-game time, so segmented runners would pause the game to think or to memorize the answers to puzzles. Obviously, in modern speedruns, this strategy is no longer used. In total, there were 3 segmented runs of this game. The first run was by Yautja Elder, but he quit before finishing. This run is still important because it helped define the early game route. This run featured a few clever time saves, but no glitches. Yautja Elder incorporated a shop climbable wall skip that normally saves 1 second, but he missed the loading trigger. Missing this loading trigger causes a lag spike, which loses some time in RTA. However, since segmented runners only cared about in-game time, this lag spike was acceptable. This run also featured a difficult trick that involves sniping sharp claws through a crack in the wall. This skips the need to bomb the wall with an explosive barrel. However, this trick can only be used in segmented runs and task runs. In RTA, the sharp claws are on a really bad cycle that makes them near impossible to hit. The last trick that this run featured was a minor skip called Ice Block Skip in the first dungeon, Dark Ice Mines. This was discovered by famous glitch hunter Kazooie, who you may have heard of from his countless Ocarina of Time glitch discoveries. Kazooie found that instead of pushing an ice block off the cliff to create a platform in the water, Fox could simply jump at a slight angle to skip this puzzle entirely. We'll be hearing a lot more about Kazooie's discoveries later, but at this point in time, Kazooie had just started glitch hunting this game. Yautja Elder got as far as finishing the first dungeon and placing Spellstone 1, but soon stopped working on the run simply because he became bored of it. However, before Yautja Elder quit, a runner by the name of Zoid surprised the community with a complete segmented run that he had been working on in secret. This run was fairly suboptimal, and Zoid even admitted that he just wanted to be the first one to finish a run of this game. I guess his strategy worked because here I am talking about it. This run only used 1 time save, and it was executed so poorly that it actually lost time. He didn't use Ice Block Skip either, since he was primarily copying Yautja's route, and Yautja hadn't uploaded this segment yet. Needless to say, the community reception of this run was very negative. Aside from the bad gameplay, the video and audio quality were bad even for the time, because he was recording to a VHS tape instead of a DVD.
I have a new mission for you, Fox. You are approaching Dinosaur Planet.
Not very pleasant to listen to. As for the run, no other tricks or glitches were used, but at least now we have our first finished run with a final time of 5 hours and 32 minutes in-game time. When retimed RTA, this is roughly 5 hours and 56 minutes real time. In 2009, a segmented runner by the name of Usiku picked up this game. Usiku was taking his time to do the run well. This can be considered the first serious run of this game. UC Pro would redo segments upwards of 100 times to get them as optimal as possible. This run used all the tricks mentioned before, plus a few new ones. In fact, some of these tricks were lost in time and wouldn't be re-implemented in runs until 2022, 13 years later. In Moon Mountain Pass, there is a mini puzzle where an explosive barrel must be carefully carried across a series of platforms and wind tunnels. UC Pro discovered a method of doing the entire puzzle with a single precise throw. When placing the second Krazoa spirit, UC Pro discovered a kamikaze technique to kill all 4 enemies at once, saving over 10 seconds because combat in this game is slow. Also, he discovered that by waiting for this flame turret to do a 180-degree turn, Fox could place an explosive barrel on a pressure plate before the turret blows it up. This skips the need to deactivate the shield and destroy the turret. UC Pro also included a trick known as the K4 drop. When turning in K4, we can skip the need to walk around this room by instead dropping onto the railing, saving about 10 seconds. It's worth noting that he used a significantly more difficult version of this trick by walking around the edges of the wind tunnel. Failing this trick is a massive time loss, so RTA runners prefer to either skip this trick entirely or use a ledge grab to get a lineup. In addition, Fierce Linkmaster discovered that an explosive barrel could be thrown through a wall in Cloud Runner Fortress. This trick saves 15 seconds by skipping the need to lower a gate. Fierce Linkmaster also discovered that Fox could bomb the pillar and press the Sharp Claw disguise switch at the same time, causing the latter cutscene to overlap with the Queen Cloud Runner cutscene, saving a few seconds. UC Pro incorporated both of these into his run, as well as a cutscene overlap in Cape Claw. He has Tricky use Flame to clear the Bramble, while at the same time turning in a Fire Gem. This causes both cutscenes to play simultaneously, saving several seconds. Now, since this is a segmented run, every part of this run looks optimal. However, one segment stood out amongst them all. In his words, "This segment has probably the most impressive part of the whole run, the Drakor fight. I almost had a heart attack after what happened here. I saved about 14 seconds that I was not expecting to save." UC Pro pulled off an insane quick kill strategy for Drakor, the final boss in Dragon Rock. Firing shots at Drakor's hand cannon deal additional damage, so with precise aim and fast mashing, this boss can be defeated quickly. This kill was so insane that I need to break it down, but first, we need to understand how terrible the aiming in this game is. When Fox pulls out his staff, the focus point is set to be directly in front of him. As you adjust to the cursor position, the game is constantly trying to snap you back to the focus point. This means that to aim precisely, you're basically constantly trying to keep your analog stick just outside the dead zone. Millimeter adjustments can be the difference between hitting and missing your target, so as you can imagine, trying to hit Drakor's hand cannon is incredibly difficult. I just wanted to point this out because this is one of those things that looks easy, but it's not. Let's get back to the breakdown. For reference, Fox spawns here. The best tool-assisted speedrun today kills Drakor here, before the first room. UC Pro got a first room kill. I'm warning you now, we will not see very many of these. In fact, nobody pulled this off in a world record run until over a decade later. In addition, Drakor is immune to damage in all of the areas marked as red. This is super annoying because failing to do enough damage in one of these rooms means you need to wait until the next room for a chance to do more damage. To help us evaluate RTA runs, we'll consider a first room kill as God tier, a second room kill as great, a third room kill as good, and a fourth room kill or worse as bad. Finally, the last trick in this run was yet another glitch discovered by Fierce Linkmaster. As mentioned earlier, Fox needs to walk to the center of this platform to start the General Scales cutscene that leads to obtaining the 6th Krazoa spirit. However, the developers made a mistake and left General Scales on the map, but out of bounds. And it turns out that by running against the wall, we can actually aggro him through the wall, causing him to walk into the map. Pulling out our staff triggers the second cutscene, skipping the first cutscene entirely, saving roughly 15 seconds. The run finished with an in-game time of 4 hours and 46 minutes, but was roughly 5 hours and 21 minutes in real time. This marks the end of the segmented runs era. At this point in time, the sequence breaks used only added up to a few minutes of time save, but this was about to rapidly change, bringing in a new era. Samurai Man would be the first runner to upload a full RTA run of the game. If the name Samurai Man sounds familiar to you, you may have seen some of his more modern speedruns. He holds a variety of records in games like Paper Mario, Metroid Dread, Super Mario Sunshine, and many others. It is unclear if there were any Star Fox Adventures runs before his world record. Goron Guy created a pace bin of the first documented RTA route before Samurai Man's run, and claimed to have been doing runs around that time. In fact, in Samurai Man's world record run, he said this.
Goron Guy said he has 526, but there's no video anywhere, even not in his Twitch channel, so I couldn't check that run. But, well, Goron Guy said, so I guess it's possible to get 526.
When I reached out to Goron Guy to see if he maybe had any footage, he said, "I genuinely don't remember anything from that run at all, to be honest with you. Not even who had the record before it either. Considering only me and Samurai Man knows about it, and the fact that there's no recorded footage from that period at all, you may as well act as if it never happened." However, his pace bin route was pretty detailed, so it's reasonable to assume that he completed a run. Also, in Samurai Man's run, he was running against old splits. His live split shows a personal best of 5 hours and 32 minutes, which was also never uploaded. Despite there being no footage of Goron Guy's 526 run, this non-existent run was important because it gave Samurai Man a goal. He took Goron Guy on his word, and he wanted to beat Goron Guy's unofficial record. To do this, he was using every trick at his disposal. First, he implemented a trick known as Seam Walk. This trick was discovered in 2010 by none other than Kazooie. Kazooie found that in the first dungeon, Fox could drop onto some railing below. By carefully walking along the seam and backpedaling off at just the right spot, Fox could drop down into the boss room early, saving roughly 2 minutes by skipping to the end of the dungeon. To understand this better, let's do a breakdown. Dark Ice Mines has an exterior and an interior section. For now, we're just going to focus on the interior. After completing the exterior, we enter the interior section by riding a snow bike through a long tunnel. This tunnel contains the loading triggers that load the interior map, and there is no backtracking after crossing through. Upon entering, a cutscene plays, and Fox rides over an edge, losing the bike. First, we need to find a key to free Tricky from prison, since he went missing in the previous section. To get this key, we head over to the back of the first room and grab a silver key. We then backtrack to the first room and do some platforming to reach Tricky's prison cell. We can then use the silver key we found to free him. Next, we kill off the enemies in the area to disable a life force door. This reveals an area where we use Tricky's flame ability to break an ice wall, leading to the gold key. We then take this key back to the prison area and free Belina Tay, the gatekeeper's daughter. From here, she freaks out and smashes the prison wall, causing rocks to fall and for us to get separated. So, we have Tricky dig a tunnel leading to the waterfall room. Our goal from here is to navigate through a few rooms to get back to the main area, reuniting with Belina Tay. In the first room, we boost up to the higher level, platform across the ice, and enter a room that you should all know by now. The same room where we perform Ice Block Skip. From here, we proceed into the main room where we reunite with Belina. Next, we have a ton of chores to do to activate an important switch. First, we escort an explosive barrel by walking it past some Donkey Kong-style rolling barrels. Once we get the barrel to the highest level, we dodge some flames, bomb a wall, and pull a switch. This lowers a bridge leading to a new side area. Now we will cover everything that Seam Walk skips, which I will mark with purple. We cross the lowered bridge to the new area where there is yet another switch. Pulling the second switch raises another bridge. We then backtrack, cross this bridge, and use a cannon to hit 2 pillars in the room. Shooting both pillars causes platforms to spawn, leading to the boss room teleporter. We then run to this teleporter and warp to Boss Galdon, who is encased in ice. We have Tricky flame him, starting the fight, and once he's dead, we gain the first spellstone. So as you can see, Seam Walk skips raising one of the bridges and skips the cannon section. Seam Walk works by dropping off the first bridge that we raise and skirting along the edges of the map to fall directly into the teleporter room. Getting back to the run, he implemented the single barrel throw strategy after collecting K2. He beat the Cloud Runner Fortress race in 2 laps, which at the time was considered great. And to quickly explain how this race works, the goal is to slam into the Sharp Claw carrying the spellstone until their bike explodes. We will do a more detailed breakdown later, later, but for now, finishing between 1 and 2 laps was considered good, and the closer to 1, the better. Returning to the run, Samurai Man made a difficult cycle in the 4th Krazoa Shrine. This requires killing the first 2 enemies quickly, bombing a wall, and then navigating across these platforms with an explosive barrel. If fast enough, Fox can place the barrel just in time to make a long cycle, saving at least 20 seconds. Also, he attempted a new trick called window jump. This requires performing a precise jump at just the right angle to avoid an invisible wall, then adjusting Fox's angle mid-jump to fall onto the railing below. Even to this day, the best runners often miss this jump due to the precision required. Samurai Man missed the jump in his run, but the fact that he went for it showed he wasn't a rookie. Here is the route difference between making the jump and failing the jump. As you can see, the jump cuts out a substantial amount of slow swimming. Also, Samurai Man used a new trick to deal early damage to the final tower in Dragon Rock by shooting it as it comes onto the screen. I'll cover Dragon Rock in more detail later, but just know that this trick saves time by reducing the damage that you need to do on the final cycle. Samurai Man also got a second Room Dracor, which was absolutely insane for the time. It's important to note that it's near impossible for a human to do a speedrun this long without making some mistakes. Samurai Man had a slow Garundate event and missed several shots in the Dark Ice Mine's cannon section.
Sloppy.
He didn't use Ice Block skip, the K4 drop, nor the turret shield skip, presumably because he didn't know these tricks existed. He didn't implement the Fire Gem cutscene overlap, and he lost a barrel in Cloudrunner Fortress. Additionally, he took a time loss on the Electric Tile puzzle, and got eaten by Andros, causing one of the boss cycles to be repeated. However, none of these mistakes were particularly major, each one only losing between 10 and 30 seconds. He more than made up for it with clean movement, fast boss kills, and nailing the important tricks. This was more than enough for Samurai Man to take home the official world record of Star Fox Adventures with actual video proof this time, with a run of 5 hours and 23 minutes. This run used several tricks, but it only ended up using one glitch, the General Scales glitch. In other words, this was almost the glitchless world record, but couldn't be considered one due to this technicality. In fact, had Samurai Man not done the General Scales glitch, his run would have stayed the glitchless world record for over 5 years. This goes to show how great of a run it was for the time, and just for completion, Celestial Derp eventually grinded the category down to 4 hours and 59 minutes, where it remains today, just barely under 5 hours. Celestial's sub 5 hour run is a good frame of reference for what an optimal glitchless run looks like today, and will help us better understand how much time the glitches save in any percent. Now let's get back to the any percent history. 3 months after Samurai Man's run, a runner by the name of Bambucha completed a run using a similar route. Throughout the run, he used a more optimal combo attack strategy to kill enemies faster. Next, he incorporated a new death warp strategy in the Thorntail Hollow Well. We enter this well after playing through Fox's intro and obtaining our companion Tricky. Inside, we obtain the Rocket Boost staff ability that lets us boost up to high locations, as well as 6 white grub tubs, which I'll explain later. Leaving this well requires a lot of backtracking, so up until now, runners had been using a save warp to return to the start of the well. Bambucha figured out that by perfectly routing his health, he could die immediately after gaining the final white grub tub. Death warps are 10 seconds faster than save warps, so this was a neat time save. Once we get the first Spellstone from Dark Ice Mines, this triggers an event in Thorntail Hollow where we need to collect 3 fireweeds, after which we place them on beacons and use Tricky's flame ability to light them. Doing this triggers a cutscene that gives us the key to Moon Mountain Pass. Bambucha figured out that while flaming the final beacon, he had just enough time to overlap this with planting a bomb spore, saving several seconds due to the cutscenes overlapping. He also implemented a few new minor time saves. Similar to the shop climbable wall skip, a similar trick was implemented in Volcano Force Point Temple, skipping the need to climb down this massive wall. Also, there's a puzzle in Walled City that requires shooting 4 switches on trees throughout the map. Bambucha figured out that you could actually shoot through these trees, allowing the switches to be hit from behind. The only mistakes he made were a slow Garunda event, taking a few unwanted falls and deaths that only cost him a few seconds each. He also missed window jump, missed the K4 barrel cycle and lost a barrel in Dragon Rock, forcing him to redo the puzzle. He finished the race in under 2 laps. He ended up getting a 3rd room Dracor kill, which is not great, but not bad either. And finally, he didn't use the scales glitch, possibly because he didn't know about it. Despite taking quite a few minor time losses, he was able to eke ahead of Samurai Man, getting a final time of 5 hours and 21 minutes, a 2-minute improvement. It's worth noting that the glitch hunting scene was already active 3 years before the first RTA runs. In fact, there were already some large sequence breaks that runners were choosing not to implement due to their difficulty. In 2007, well before any of the segmented runs, Kazooie had found an interesting glitch in Walled City. By rolling and using the Groundquake ability on the next frame, Fox could get across this small gap. This is known as a Groundquake hover, but more on this later. From here, Fox is officially out of bounds. We then simply drop through a hole in the terrain to land in some water, allowing Fox to swim in the air. This would become the defining glitch of the speedruns from this era. This sounds like it should be super broken, but it was actually quite difficult to find a time save with this, because the air swim has a few key limitations. First, it is not possible to freely dive while swimming in this game. The only diving that is possible is a brief gravity dive when initially falling into the water. Once Fox rises to the surface of the water, he is locked into that height. The only exception is that if Fox manages to approach another plane of water, if that water plane is 125 units below Fox or 116 units above Fox, Fox will transfer to the new water plane height. Second, Fox can only cancel an air swim if his feet collide with something solid or if a cutscene is triggered. Third, swimming too far out of bounds causes a soft lock where Fox freezes in place and no longer responds to input. Maps can generally only be loaded by hitting specific loading triggers, making it very difficult to carry an air swim from one map to another. To give an idea of why it was difficult to use this to save time, we need to look at how Walled City actually works. However, to understand Walled City, we first need to understand how acts work. Acts can be considered as different versions of the same map. The game decides which version to load based on various story flags. The important ones to know are Cape Claw 1, 2, and 3, and Walled City 1 and 2. For now, we are focusing on Walled City 1. Once we arrive, we shoot a switch in a tree. We will need to shoot 4 of these total, but I'll get to this in a moment. Next, we head into the central area of the map and shoot another switch, after which we use Groundquake on a panel. This starts a timed event where we must climb the temple and proceed through an underground tunnel. After emerging from the tunnel, we have Tricky flame the grate on the other side. We then repeat this entire process for the panel on the other side of the map. Once both are flamed, a door opens, revealing a path to an underground chamber. From here, we walk through this now opened door and approach Tricky's dad. This triggers a long cutscene, after which a bridge is raised. We cross the bridge, shoot the 3rd switch, and proceed to the shrine. Inside, we gain the Super Groundquake ability. This ability has exactly one use in the entire run. It allows us to kill the 4 red eyes on the map. That's it. Once these are dead, a life force door opens and inside is a gold tooth. We don't actually collect it yet as a routing optimization. We then shoot the final switch nearby, after which a river minigame is unlocked. For this minigame, we simply swim through all of the rings in the river before the timer expires. Completing the river minigame gives us a silver tooth. From here, we can finally collect the gold tooth. We then take both of these teeth back to the underground chamber where Tricky's dad was. Placing both of these teeth opens the gate to the King Red Eye boss. Killing this boss gives us Spellstone 3. I like diagrams, so let's lay this out. We use Groundquake to open the underground chamber. Tricky's dad then raises a bridge. That bridge lets us get Super Groundquake. We use this ability for the sole purpose of obtaining a gold tooth. Also, we can now cross the bridge to hit the final switch, do the river minigame, and get a silver tooth. Finally, we use these to open a door to the boss. 3 years later, Kazooie finally cracked the code and figured out how to use the Walled City air swim to save time. First, in 2010, he discovered that Fox could exploit a misplaced ledge jump trigger to get out of bounds and start an air swim. This meant that we no longer needed to do the frame-perfect Groundquake cover to get out of bounds. Also, he figured out that this could be used to access the King Red Eye boss early. We cancel our air swim while partially clipped inbounds, and from here we can drop directly into the underground chamber. Then we backtrack to hit another loading trigger and a cutscene trigger, after After watching the cutscene, this room is in a partially unloaded state, allowing us to load the boss map early by hitting yet another loading trigger and then simply running into the back wall. Returning to the diagram from earlier, this meant that we could now skip both the gold and silver teeth, as well as the super groundquake ability. However, we can't skip opening the underground chamber because we need to enter it in Walled City 2 much later in the run in order to raise the temple and reveal the 5th Krazoa shrine. This essentially allowed us to collect Spellstone 3 several minutes early. Bambucha would be the first runner to finally try routing in the Walled City Airswim, only 4 days after obtaining his world record. This run also featured a new time save. By falling into the well instead of sliding down the ladder, this skips a save checkpoint. This meant that later when doing the death warp, we would actually warp out of the well entirely, saving 30 seconds or so. Bambucha was executing well, over 2 minutes ahead of his world record. Unfortunately, he took a fall in Ocean Force Point Temple, but quickly made up for it by being the first runner to pull off window jump in a run. Bambucha executed the first flame dowsing puzzle incredibly well, but mismanaged his mana. For context, there is a puzzle that requires shooting switches at just the right time to put out flames. Afterwards, there is another puzzle that requires shooting a block to slide it through a small maze. Later in the run during Ocean Force Point Temple 2, harder versions of these puzzles are active. The flame puzzle also requires matching colors, and the maze puzzle is slightly longer. Frustratingly, these are mana-intensive puzzles, and there is no convenient mana nearby. This is actually the primary reason that we obtain mana upgrades in this run. Running out of mana here means executing a slow backup strat that requires collecting magic from a mana plant on top of a climbable wall. This is exactly what happened to Bambucha. Climbing is slow in this game, so this was an annoying time loss. And last but not least, he implemented the Walled City Airswim. This glitch put him well above world record pace, but honestly, he didn't need it. Throughout this run, he made very few mistakes. He took a fall in the K4 shrine, causing him to miss the barrel cycle, and he still wasn't using the general scales glitch. The only major mistake was a 4th room Drakor kill, losing him at least a minute and 30 seconds. He finished out the run with a final time of 5 hours and 14 minutes, a massive 7-minute improvement. It's also worth noting that there was yet another time save that runners were choosing not to implement due to its difficulty. On September 1st, 2010, a player by the name of Serpent figured out that by moving very slowly off of the waterfall in Thorntail Hollow, Fox could start an airswim on that map as well. This was significant because this is the first map you play on as Fox, and it serves as a central hub connecting to several other maps. This had high sequence break potential, and only 2 weeks later, Kazooie found one. By canceling this airswim out of bounds on the edge of the map in Thorntail Hollow, we can then do some careful out-of-bounds navigation along the edge of the map. From here, we can drop into yet another body of water, starting a second airswim. This airswim allows us to swim underneath the toll gate leading to Cape Claw. We can then cancel the airswim on a convenient door frame and proceed to Cape Claw by hitting a couple loading triggers. This is significantly faster than opening the toll gate, so this glitch was performed twice in the run. To learn what this skips, let's take a look at what it normally takes to open this toll gate. After collecting Spellstone 1, we return to Thorntail to do the beacon event for the Moon Mountain Pass key. Next, we simply walk up the Moon Mountain Pass path and use this key to open a gate. Beyond the gate, we now have access to Volcano Force Point Temple. In addition, the first Spellstone also serves as a key to several doors inside the temple, ultimately granting us access to the Freeze Blast ability. We then immediately use this ability to solve a puzzle, granting us access to the interior maps. Then, we solve a few more puzzles to enter the room where we turn in the first Spellstone. This triggers a story event that happens when we start backtracking into Moon Mountain Pass. A cutscene plays that results in a sliding stone door opening, leading to the Groundquake ability. This ability is used to defeat a new type of enemy, which drops a seed that we can flame to gain access to the rest of Moon Mountain Pass. We continue down the path, eventually arriving at the 2nd Krazoa Shrine. This grants us the 2nd Krazoa Spirit upon completion. Afterwards, we backtrack to Thorntail Hollow, and from here the the warp stone sends us to Krazoa Palace, where we turn in the second spirit. As a reward, he gives us yet another scarab bag upgrade, increasing our capacity to 100. Scarabs are the currency of Dinosaur Planet, and we need 60 of them to open the toll gate. Since we now skip the toll gate, we no longer need the 100 scarab bag, which means we no longer need Krazoa Spirit 2. We still need to collect Spellstone 1 because this gives us the key to Moon Mountain Pass and the Freeze Blast ability, and we still need to place Spellstone 1 because that gives us Groundquake. The only required use of Groundquake is solving the various puzzles in Walled City, so skipping those puzzles would become a major glitch hunting focus point. The first person to finally route in Cape Claw early would be a runner by the name of Usiku. This run featured 3 air swims, 1 in Walled City, and 2 separate instances of Cape Claw early. This is because the route needed to pass under the Cape Claw tollgate twice. For the most part, Usiku executed these glitches pretty well, especially considering that this was the first run to use them. The only major time loss came from the second Cape Claw early air swim, which took Usiku 7 attempts to get. It takes between 10 and 15 seconds to retry each attempt, so this can add up pretty quickly. Fortunately, Usiku executed the difficult out-of-bounds navigation without any mistakes. There was one mistake where Usiku backtracked too far when hitting the Cape Claw loading triggers, but this was simply due to the fact that at the time, nobody was sure exactly where they were. She took a fall on the Ocean Force Point Temple platforms, but she landed window jump, which more than made up for it. She utilized a new minor time save by clipping into this rock with rocket boost, skipping the need to flip it over. She also incorporated the early spire damage trick. For whatever reason, only Usiku and Samurai Man used this trick, and it would be many years until future runners would bring this trick back. She got a 3rd room Dracor and made the K4 barrel cycle. Finally, she implemented the optimal version of Scales glitch, where Fox approaches the left side of the portal and runs up to the right. Up until now, runners had been doing this glitch poorly or not at all. However, this run also had quite a few mistakes. This was expected, since whenever a new glitch is discovered, the first run to use it is highly unlikely to be perfect. Her Cloud Runner Fortress race took about 2.5 laps, and at this point in time, anything under 2 was considered good. Usiku also made some mistakes during both trips to Ocean Force Point Temple. She mismanaged her mana, so she had to execute the slow climbable wall backup strat twice in the run. In addition, she took an R-Wing death on the flight to Walled City 1. Also, there were some minor route problems, such as suboptimal fuel cell routing. Finally, she didn't do enough damage on the second Andros brain cycle, causing an unwanted 3rd phase. Despite the mistakes, nailing the new glitches was enough to clock in at 5 hours and 11 minutes, setting a new world record. Later that year, a new runner named NarbeVoguel joined the fray, and she used the same route as Usiku. By strange coincidence, Narb repeated the same mistake that was made in the last 2 world records. She took a fall in the Ocean Force Point Temple platforms, but was able to make up for it by landing window jump. Additionally, she clutched out a room 2.5 Dracor kill. I never really mentioned this, but there's a brief corner between rooms 2 and 3 where you can get off a few hits on Dracor, and Narb managed to kill him here. This run had a few minor mistakes, such as a slow Garunda event, missing quite a few shots on the Dark Ice Mine's cannon, losing a barrel in Cloud Runner Fortress, taking slightly over 2 laps in the Cloud Runner race, taking 5 attempts to get the second Cape Claw air swim, and got electrocuted twice in the tile puzzle. I never really mentioned this puzzle, but it's quite simple. When entering Ocean Force Point Temple, you need to memorize a grid pattern to determine which tiles are safe to walk across. When returning to Ocean Force Point Temple 2, a harder version of this puzzle activates with 9 rows instead of 6. Stepping on the wrong tile electrocutes Fox and loses considerable time. This run also had one major time loss. In the 3rd Krazoa Shrine, there is a minigame called Test of Fear, where the player must keep the red line within the green bounds. Honestly, this is actually more of a memorization minigame because the game is pre-scripted to rapidly move the line to either the left or the right at specific moments. She ended up failing this event, forcing her to redo the entire shrine. This is actually a pretty common choke point, and most runners just reset if they fail it. However, she continued the run, and on September 14th, 2014, she finished with a final time of 5 hours and 7 minutes. It's worth noting that this run was never actually submitted. It technically broke the rules by using a feature to give the game dinosaur language subtitles. This requires having beaten the game first on another file, technically making it a New Game Plus feature, even though it doesn't change the gameplay at all. However, I'm still going to count this run, and it doesn't matter anyways, because Narb wasn't done. She wanted to clean up this run, so she continued to grind the category. Narb's next run was nearly identical, but she cleaned up a lot of the mistakes. This run was going perfectly until she took a fall during Cape Claw Early 2, forcing her to save quit reload, losing nearly 2 minutes. She fell off the edge in Walled City 1, costing her 15 seconds, and she missed a barrel throw on the King Red-Eye fight, resulting in an extra cycle. And to quickly explain this fight, you need to step on switches to give the boss an electric shock, then throw an explosive barrel to hurt him while he's down. If you miss the switch timing, you will end up having to redo a cycle. However, these were the only notable mistakes. The rest of the run had incredibly clean movement, and she happily whistled her way through this run. And on September 18th, 2014, she closed out with a final time of 5 hours and 3 minutes, a 4-minute improvement. At this point, the race was on. Sub 5 was within reach. All it would take is a cleaner run or a new time save. I mentioned earlier that skipping Groundquake was a major glitch hunting focus point, and glitch hunters had an interesting idea. What if instead of getting Groundquake, we skip directly to Super Groundquake? Obtaining Groundquake takes 8 minutes, but Super Groundquake only takes 2 minutes. With the Walled City out-of-bounds jump, this actually ended up being possible. However, there was a major problem. If we obtain Super Groundquake without unlocking Groundquake first, the game prevents us from using the ability. Yet another frustrating dead end. However, 4 months after Narb's world record, she discovered something interesting. By selecting Fire Blast from the item wheel and having a different ability hotkey to the Y button, by pressing A and Y at the same time, the hotkeyed ability would be used instead of Fire Blast. This glitch came to be known as spell swapping. On the surface, this seems like a useless glitch. Who cares if you use the wrong ability? But remember what I said before about the Super Groundquake ability not working unless Fox also had Groundquake? Well, it turns out with spell swapping, we could bypass this restriction. This was a massive breakthrough. This meant that the new optimal strategy was to skip turning in Spellstone 1, skip Groundquake, and obtain Super Groundquake instead. To recap what this cuts out, we no longer need to continue deeper into Volcano Force Point Temple 1 to finish the puzzles. This cuts out a long cutscene that plays when entering the puzzle area, and cuts out a long cutscene that plays when leaving the temple. After grabbing Freeze Blast, we could now simply turn around and leave without placing the first spellstone. If implemented in a run, this new discovery would save about 6 minutes. In other words, sub 5 was pretty much free to anybody who could execute the glitches. Bambucha saw the opportunity to reclaim the throne, so he would be the first to attempt runs with this new trick. He made some slight improvements, so let's do a quick breakdown of Walled City 1. The new strategy was to arrive, perform an air swim, and glitch into the underground chamber. We then hit the necessary loading triggers to activate the boss loading zone. Then we talked to Tricky's dad to activate a cutscene to raise the bridge to Super Groundquake. We can't obtain the ability yet since we never opened the door to the underground chamber. In other words, we are locked inside. Fortunately, killing the boss warps us out, so we head into the boss room, collect Spellstone 3, and once we warp out, we can finally grab Super Groundquake. Before leaving Walled City, we open the door to the underground chamber so that we can access it later during Walled City 2. As you can see, quite a bit bit has been cut out since our last breakdown. We no longer do the river minigame, and we no longer kill the 4 red eyes. So, Bambucha got to grinding. And of course, he implemented the extra air swim that allowed for obtaining super groundquake early. Using spell swapping, he was able to solve all of the puzzles that we would normally solve with regular groundquake. Oh, and Bambucha finally started using the general scales glitch. Thanks to the new glitches, he was massively above world record pace. With that said, he didn't make very many mistakes either. He messed up some fuel cell routing, causing him to improvise a clumsy backup strat. He hilariously lost 20 seconds by going AFK because he thought he was in a longer cutscene. He took an unwanted death in Cloud Runner Fortress, costing him 40 seconds, and finally, he missed the K4 barrel cycle. Despite a couple silly mistakes, this was an absolutely phenomenal run. He won back the world record with a time of 4 hours and 55 minutes, which was the first sub 5-hour time. Around 2015, a new runner by the name of JubJub62 started learning to speedrun this game. Interestingly, before he started doing runs, he spent a good amount of time glitch hunting this game. He was particularly interested in optimizing Walled City. Specifically, he had the idea to skip opening the underground chamber entirely. After all, we already use an air swim to get inside the first time, so why not do it a second time? To understand this, we're going to need to learn how Walled City 2 works. It's actually quite simple. Upon arrival, Tricky's dad is now outside the temple. Speaking to him opens 2 side areas of Walled City, the Sun Temple and the Moon Temple. Both of these work similarly. Each has a block-pushing puzzle on the outside, and after solving this, we use the zoom goggles to open up the entrances. Inside are more puzzles that require groundquake and a few other abilities. Inside the Moon Temple is the Moonstone, and inside the Sun Temple is the Sunstone. Similar to the gold and silver teeth, we then take both of these stones into the underground chamber and turn them in. Once both are placed, the central temple leading to K5 is revealed. From here, we simply walk to the top of the temple and warp to the K5 shrine. We then solve a series of linear, simple puzzles, complete a small minigame at the end, collect K5, and warp out. Then we board the R-Wing and fly back to Krazoa Palace to do the outro of the game. As I've mentioned, if we try to skip opening the underground chamber, after placing the Sun and Moonstones, we would be soft-locked. This is due to the fact that we need to run through a trigger to load the area, but it also sets our save point inside the chamber, preventing us from save warping out. Or at least that's what we thought. JubJub figured out that the save trigger and loading trigger are in fact 2 separate triggers. His strategy would be to swim into the loading trigger since it's aligned with the air swim height, then drop in from above similar to King Red-Eye early, avoiding the save trigger entirely. This would allow us to turn in the stones and save warp out without soft locking, skipping the need to open the underground chamber. This meant that we no longer needed to use groundquake on the panels to start the events to flame the 2 grates. As a result, Walled City 1 would drastically change. We arrive, do an air swim to do King Red-Eye early, while also raising the bridge. After finishing the boss fight and getting warped out, we walk over the raised bridge to grab Super Groundquake, then save warp back to the R-Wing. Every single puzzle and minigame has been eliminated. Isn't this so much nicer to look at than before? The new Walled City 2 would now look like this. It starts off the same. We enter the Sun Temple to grab the Sunstone, and we enter the Moon Temple to grab the Moonstone. After this, instead of walking into the chamber, we now do a second air swim to swim into the chamber since it's closed, and then we save warp out. The differences are shown in purple. So, JubJub got to grinding, and it was only a matter of time until the world record was his. This run was going well with only a few major mistakes. It took him a long time to get the first Cape Claw early air swim, and he clipped back and bounds during the second Cape Claw early air swim, costing him over a minute. He missed the Fire Gem cutscene overlap, he got electrocuted in Ocean Force Point Temple 1, he struggled on the Lightfoot Village Totem puzzle, and was slow on the Ocean Force Point Temple 2 Flame puzzle. Additionally, he wasn't using a lot of the minor time saves that other runners knew about, such as the General Scales glitch, the Lightfoot Village rock clip, or a glitch glitch in Cloudrunner Fortress where we activate a switch without breaking a box first. Despite the time losses, this run was on world record pace and it all came down to executing the new glitch.
So I need this to load. Okay. Then I drop down like I do with Red Eye King. Okay. I'm glad that went well. But now we have to save warp out.
From here, it was just a matter of closing out the run, and on November 9th, 2015, he finished with a final time of 4 hours and 51 minutes, a 4-minute improvement over Bambucha. I actually glossed over a small detail. This was actually Jubjub's second world record. He already had the world record, but footage of the previous record was lost. At the time, Jubjub didn't want his face on his YouTube videos anymore, so he took down some old runs. This meant that his 4 hour and 54 minute previous world record was lost. This is fine because he was likely using the exact same route, so we can just assume that his 4 hour and 51 minute run was a cleaner version of his previous record. He continued the grind, and 7 months later, he got a run that fixed most of his previous mistakes.
Oh my god. Dude. Holy shit. No, okay. It's not the worst, it's just a skip. We can just go the regular way. Okay. Good. Because if I miss this cycle, that's like at least a minute I'm losing. There's a risk. Or not. No. If I had known that was a thing, I would not have picked the barrel up. I would love that in this room. Oh, you fucker. See, that Dracor, I got so much better at Dracor, because I used to never get him in that room. Ever. Yes! So I never did open the underground right here. So the only way to get back in here without getting trapped in here is to load it from an Airswim. Okay. And I just drop back in like before. Then we get save warp out of here, and it should put us back by the Moonstone Temple. The sub 449. Oh my god. Oh my god.
Jubjub unexpectedly golded his final Andros split, getting him a world record of 4 hours and 48 minutes, when he was expecting to get 4 hours and 49 minutes. After the run was over, Jubjub broke down the mistakes he made, and there weren't very many.
Okay, let me go over the mistakes. It was just sloppy movement in Dark Ice Mines. Spellstone 2, it was just the boss fight that was kind of bad. That's how I lost time there. Then Spellstone 4, I fucked up in the barrel escorting, which is like the worst part of Dragon Rock. But luckily there was another 20-second time saver in that split.
This run would be incredibly difficult to beat without new strats or glitches, and speaking of glitches, there were a few potential skips that you should be aware of. I never mentioned this, but back in 2010, Kazooie actually found 2 additional skips that could be done with an air swim. We already know about King Red-Eye early and Cape Claw early, so let's look at the remaining 2. Kazooie found that the 3rd Krazoa Spirit could be collected early. This involved using an air swim nearly identical to the Cape Claw tollgate skip. However, instead of going under the tollgate, we swim right into Lightfoot Village. We can then cancel the air swim on some crates, allowing us to access the 3rd Krazoa Shrine early. This air swim skips all of Lightfoot Village and should save 10 minutes in theory. However, there was a major problem with this. There is a stone door blocking the exit, and we have no way of getting it open to escape. In other words, we are soft locked. Let's take a look at how we normally open this door. After obtaining Spellstone 2 from Cloudrunner Fortress, we proceed to Cape Claw 2. Here we must obtain 2 fire gems. We then use these to open the doors leading to Ocean Force Point Temple. Along the way we solve several puzzles, enter the temple, solve even more puzzles, and finally warp to the inner chamber. We then place the 2nd spellstone and get warped out. This causes a story flag to get set, and on the way back to Thorntail, we get kidnapped by the residents of Lightfoot Village. We then must complete 3 back-to-back minigames, after which the Lightfoot Chieftain allows us to enter the underground chamber leading to the 3rd Krazoa Shrine. Normally, we would just warp to the shrine, collect a spirit, warp out, and continue back to Thorntail Hollow. Sadly, since we have no way of escaping, this trick was a dead end, and runners had no choice but to collect K3 normally. The 4th and final Kazooie Airswim discovery was a glitch known as Dark Ice Mines Early. This glitch grants us access to the first Gatekeeper early, granting us access to the first dungeon early. This glitch is performed by starting an airswim in Thorntail Hollow. An important detail to note is that not all Thorntail airswims are equal. The edge of the waterfall is not even, so we backpedal in a precise location to make sure we start our airswim as low as possible. From here, we swim out of bounds to load the sewer map. Thanks to our lower height, we can just barely go underneath the floor to cancel our air swim. Then we drop into the lower water plane while remaining out of bounds. From here, Fox can swim along the edge of the map to hit the loading triggers to load Snowhorn Wastes. Once the map is loaded, this glitch becomes stressful. Fox begins to take hypothermia damage because Fox is technically swimming on a snow map. This means he will die in exactly 60 seconds with full HP. Within this 1 minute time frame, Fox must carefully swim half in bounds in a few locations to hit some loading triggers, then swim out of bounds to bypass the locked Snowhorn Gate. This gate leads to the Gatekeeper, who will unlock the first dungeon, Dark Ice Mines. Unfortunately, runners were unable to use this glitch in runs either. To understand why, we need to look at how runners normally go through this gate. First, once we start the game as Fox, we obtain our staff, the Fire Blast ability, our companion Tricky, a mana upgrade, and finally an upgrade to our Scarab Bag, raising our capacity from 10 to 50. This new capacity allows us to buy 2 items from the shop. First, we buy zoom goggles, which are used much later in the run, and more importantly, we buy a lantern. Showing this lantern to the Thorntail inside the well triggers a short cutscene, after which he moves out of the way and we can plant a bomb spore to reveal the lower section. Once inside, we collect 6 white grub tubs to feed to the sick Queen Earthwalker, who gives us a key in return. We then backtrack to Snowhorn Wastes and use that key to gain access to a closed-off area. In this area, we complete a minigame to free Garundate, Gatekeeper of the Dark Ice Mines. As you can see, skipping this gate would mean that we no longer needed to purchase the Firefly Lantern, nor collect the white grub tubs from the well. Descending into this well is tedious, so cutting this out would save several minutes. While all of this sounds nice, this strategy had one major problem. You see, much later in the run, we return to this map to enter the 4th Krazoa Shrine, which is sealed behind a gate. To open this gate, we bring the Snowhorn artifact to a blue mammoth on this map, which unlocks the Snowhorn Trials. To complete these trials, we use a blowhorn which we obtain from Dark Ice Mines on a series of blowhorn pads. This event needs to be completed within a very short time limit. Frustratingly, the final 2 blowhorn pads are behind the Snowhorn Gate. In other words, if we skipped opening this gate, we would not be able to complete the Snowhorn Trials, and we would be soft-locked and unable to collect the 4th Krazoa Spirit, yet another dead end. This begs the question, what if instead of skipping the Snowhorn Gate again, we just skipped the K4 Gate instead? To give an idea of how massive this would be, let's look at the dependencies. Skipping this gate would mean we would never need to do the Snowhorn Trials, which would mean we no longer need the Snowhorn Artifact, which means we wouldn't need the final Scarab Bag upgrade, which means we wouldn't need Spellstone 3. In addition, it means we would not need to pass through the Snowhorn Gate the second time, allowing for Dark Ice Mines early. Needless to say, skipping the K4 Gate became a major glitch hunting focus point. Sadly, even if we did find a way to skip the K4 Gate, we would be soft-locked behind the gate after collecting the 4th Krazoa Spirit, similar to the problem with Krazoa Spirit 3. This marks the end of the Airswim Era. This is a bittersweet era glitch-wise because it has some of the most amazing glitches, but also several glitches that are just barely out of reach. The next era spans from roughly 2016 to 2018. This is when Japanese glitch hunter BDQR ZXI5 entered the scene. From here on, I'll be referring to him as BDQR as most of us do. In this era, significant sequence breaks were discovered in all 4 dungeons. Also, at the start of this era, BDQR finished the first ever tool-assisted speedrun of this game. This task was completed in November of 2016 and featured a ton of never-before-seen tricks. The final time was 4 hours and 8 minutes, about 40 minutes faster than the best human run. The first skip of this era was in Dark Ice Mine's exterior. I haven't gone over the routing for this area yet, so let's do a breakdown. After arriving in the R-Wing, we platform from the lava section to the snow section and have Tricky dig a tunnel. Inside, we kill the enemies to deactivate a life force door, behind which is a shackle key that we grab before turning around to leave. We use this key to free a mammoth, which triggers a short cutscene, after which she gives us a cog in return. We then use this cog to repair a bridge mechanism, and activating it extends a bridge, allowing us to proceed to the next area. From here, we defeat the enemies attacking a wounded mammoth, and as a reward, he teaches Tricky the flame ability. However, he is still injured, and he wants us to get 2 alpine roots to feed him. I'll be marking this part in purple because we will revisit it later. The first alpine root isn't too far away and just requires using flame to break an ice wall, then using the find ability to dig it up. The second one is more annoying. This requires us to backtrack, flame another ice wall, flame a campfire to crack the ice so that we can drop below, flame another ice wall, and finally grab the second root. From here, we push an ice block to the back wall so that we can climb out. We then bring these back to the mammoth, who recovers after eating them. This unlocks the option for us to ride this mammoth, which we use to break open a massive gate. We then dismount from this mammoth and flame another ice wall. This reveals a path leading to another bridge mechanism. However, this time it needs 3 cogs. We ignore this for now and continue to the Dark Ice Mine's cannon. We use it to shoot wood panels blocking a path, as well as shoot and kill all of the enemies. Once they are all dead, the life force door below opens and we descend to grab the first cog. There is another cog nearby, so we grab that one too. We then enter the now unblocked entrance where the wood panels used to be, flame another ice wall, and grab the final cog. Finally, we backtrack to the bridge mechanism and use the cogs to extend the bridge. We then cross this bridge and enter a hidden room. Inside this room, we flame 4 grates before the timer expires, which reveals the pathway leading to the blowhorn. We can then take this blowhorn to a special pad, which summons the second mammoth. We ride this mammoth through a blizzard, at which point Tricky gets separated from us and imprisoned within the Dark Ice Mine's interior. So we use our mammoth to break another wood panel and kill the enemies inside to disable a life force door. Behind this door, we hop on a snow bike and ride it into the interior maps. We already covered the interior, so you know what happens from here. Getting back to the discoveries, BDQR found a way to skip the purple sections that I outlined earlier. He found a comically simple trick where Fox could walk through some missing collision on a nearby fence, skipping a loading trigger near the first mammoth. This would cause the gate to partially deload. It still has partial collision, so we roll into the wall to skip the gate entirely. To recap, the gate deload trick skips the need to find 2 alpine roots, feed them to the mammoth, and use the mammoth to break open the gate, saving 4 minutes. This trick was incredibly easy, meaning that the world record was up for grabs again. Jub would be the first runner to route in this new skip.
So here it is. That's it. So, and then you can... There's an invisible wall there still, but you can roll past the left side like that and clip in.
This glitch put him well above world record pace, and he just needed to maintain this pace.
Gotcha. 444, 36. Maybe a second lower. It's always a second lower. I split late.
With the new skip and good overall execution, on September 8th, 2016, Jub lowered the world record by another 4 minutes to 4 hours and 44 minutes. However, not everything went perfectly. His Garunda was slow, he hit a wall right before the first Cloud Runner race lap, losing a ton of time. Later in the run, he fell into the Moon Temple instead of landing in the water during Walled City 1. This forced him to save quit reload to try again, losing at least a minute. Clearly there was still time to save, but before that could happen, 3 more skips were discovered thanks to BBQR. In the 4th dungeon, Dragon Rock, there is a tedious puzzle that requires disabling flames at just the right time to carry a barrel to the wind tunnels. Inside these wind tunnels, we must throw the barrel at just the right time to avoid the flames. I'll cover Dragon Rock in more detail later, but in the meantime, BBQR discovered that Fox could throw the barrel through the wind tunnel walls. This skipped most of the puzzle, saving about a minute. I haven't really touched on this, but even though the collision system in this game is exceptional, for some reason barrels thrown at angles can be clipped through most walls easily. We also found even more ways to break Walled City. As you know, there are 2 annoying problems with Walled City 1 and 2. First, we use the zoom goggles in Super Groundquake for the sole purpose of obtaining the sun and moonstones. If we could somehow use the Airswim to get these stones early, we would save substantial time by skipping both of the requirements. Jub technically found a way to do this, but unfortunately his methods were too slow to be routed in. His solution required first using an Airswim to hit loading triggers, and then backtracking to start yet another Airswim to clip inside the temple. We would need something better. BBQR was up for the challenge and found a substantially faster method. He figured out that you could use a gravity dive to maintain our Airswim inside the Moon Temple. From here, we simply cancel the Airswim, hit the necessary loading triggers, collect the Moonstone, and save warp out. Amazingly, a similar method could be applied to the Sunstone. By getting out of bounds and doing a gravity dive into a water plane near the Sun Temple, Fox could get inside the temple while maintaining an Airswim. The out of bounds navigation and triggers were substantially harder in this temple, making Sunstone early one of the hardest tricks in the run. And just like that, BBQR eliminated both Super Groundquake and the zoom goggles from the run entirely. Now, if you are very observant, you may be wondering, can't we just get the sun and moonstones during Walled City 1? Wouldn't grabbing and turning them in allow for accessing the 5th Krazoa Shrine early? Sadly not. Even if we got both stones early, they can only be turned in while Walled City 2 is active, so there was no sequence break potential here. Also, for some unknown reason, an invisible wall is active that prevents entering the Sunstone room during Walled City 1. However, we can still get the Moonstone early during Walled City 1, which is great because it moves some of the risk from the endgame into the mid-game. As an added bonus, the new changes allowed for a more optimal version of King Red-Eye early, where we skip raising the bridge leading to Super Groundquake and instead go directly into triggering the boss fight. To pull this off, we now load the room as before, but instead of swimming to drop in from above, we simply navigate along the edges of the map, carefully dodging the cutscene trigger for Tricky's dad. Then, we continue along the edge of the map and enter the King Red-Eye boss loading zone. This trick is harder to execute but saves substantial time by cutting out extra swimming. Additionally, the same trick could be applied to Walled City 2 when turning in the sun and moonstones. By walking along the edge of the map, we can just barely dodge the save and cutscene triggers. This trick is incredibly precise. If Fox is too far to the left, he falls out of bounds. Too far to the right, and Fox hits a save trigger that causes him to get soft locked behind the door inside the temple, and the run is over. If done successfully, we can turn in both stones and save warp to escape. Let's do another quick breakdown of the changes to Walled City. In Walled City 1, we perform an Airswim and collect Moonstone early. We then save warp out, do another Airswim, and perform the new version of King Red-Eye early, where we walk along the edge of the underground chamber. We then warp to the boss, collect the 3rd Spellstone, and warp out upon completion. We then head to the R-Wing and leave. That's it. Walled City 2 is similarly optimized. We arrive in the R-Wing, perform an Airswim to obtain Sunstone early, save warp back to the R-Wing, and do the final Airswim to access the underground chamber, where we turn in both stones, raise the temple, save warp out, walk up the temple, warp to K5, complete the puzzles inside, satisfied, warp out, and leave. These new skips would make Walled City the single hardest dungeon in the game. We now perform 4 separate air swims on this map. I've personally witnessed many world record pace runs by Jub and other runners die here. Before runners could implement the new Walled City changes, yet another skip was found in the second dungeon, Cloudrunner Fortress, so it's time for another breakdown. We will be covering the race map in detail later, so for now let's ignore it. Upon arrival, we immediately head into the water to do a short gauntlet where we do some platforming to jump through rings. Upon completion, this reveals a switch that opens the main gate. From here we proceed up the ramp, flip a switch to open another gate, and head into the central area. This triggers a cutscene where we get imprisoned. From here we sneak out of our jail cell and bomb the ceiling. This supposedly helps us establish a connection with Slippy, who beams us the disguise ability. We use this disguise to get back our staff from the jailkeeper Sharpclaw, who is keeping it. Now that we have our staff, we use it to free Greatabug, an imprisoned dinosaur. As a reward, he gives us a power room key, which we will need later. Next, we use Fire Blast to shoot a switch to escape the prison area entirely and ascend back into the central area. From here, we do 3 back-to-back small gauntlets. These are pretty straightforward. We push a switch, a gate opens, and we have to get to the gate before it closes. We repeat this a total of 3 times to obtain the red, bluish, and green light gems. We then use our power room key to access a room filled with gas and quickly place the 3 gems before the gas has a chance to kill us. This restores power to all of the wind lifts, allowing us to access the rest of Cloudrunner Fortress. So we proceed around the edge of the map and use our disguise ability to open a gate leading to the back of the dungeon. Killing the enemies in this area disables a life force door, and inside is an explosive barrel that can only be carried while using the Sharpclaw disguise. Then we must lift the barrel to a higher floor and use it to bomb a wooden door. Normally, we're supposed to then enter this main area and pull 2 switches to lower a gate. However, we've already been skipping this gate for years by clipping our barrel through the wall. The skipped part is in purple. Instead of opening this gate as intended, we clip a barrel past the gate and go around the gate entirely. This is done by going back through the wood door we just bombed and dropping down. We then pick up the barrel and bomb the pillar. This is a pretty minor skip, only cutting out pulling a couple switches. There is too much clutter, so let's wipe the slate clean from here. At this point, the Queen Cloudrunner gives us the incredibly tedious task of backtracking through the entire dungeon. Our task is to kill the enemies attacking her babies and use a flute on them to get them to fly back to her. Once done, she opens a door leading to some interior rooms, where we bring an explosive barrel to bomb a wall and access the Cloudrunner race map. Fortunately, BBQR found a massive skip in this dungeon. He found Baby Cloudrunner Skip, skipping the need to backtrack through the entire dungeon. Everything in purple is skipped, although as a side effect, we could no longer do the barrel clip glitch from earlier since we need the gate to be open. This skip abuses a glitch with the wind tunnel to access the dungeon boss early. Normally, when entering the wind tunnel from the top, a flag is set on Fox that allows him to drop down 1 level. This causes Fox to drop from the top level to the middle level. However, by save quitting after bombing a pillar that triggers a cutscene, this cutscene is queued for the next time we return to that area. By queuing this cutscene and entering through the wind tunnel, this cutscene warps Fox out of the wind tunnel, but doesn't clear the wind tunnel flag. This flag is supposed to make us drop from floor 2 to floor 1, but instead we abuse the flag storage to drop from floor 1 to the basement. We bring an explosive barrel with us to break a wall, and from here we can go directly to the dungeon boss, saving 3 minutes. Jub had taken several months off of this game, but came back in January of 2017 to continue grinding this category, using all of the new tricks.
Hang on. What? What? Dude, I'm missing a lot of fuel cells. Oh no, dude! I forgot the ones on Volcano! Okay, here's what I'm gonna try and do. I'm just gonna go get these now then.
He realized he accidentally messed up his fuel cell routing. He had no choice but to improvise a terrible backup strat. This required backtracking to an earlier part of the game and pushing an ice block to get 2 of the slowest fuel cells in the entire game. This moved him from being 3 minutes ahead of world record pace to 1 minute behind. Poor health management in Dragon Rock and a room 2.5 Dracor put him yet another minute behind. I know we said 2.5 was good before, but at this point Jub was consistently getting room 2 kills. So so this wasn't good for him. By the time he got to Walled City 2, he was nearly 3 minutes behind, but to his surprise, the new Walled City glitches were enough to put him 1 minute ahead, back on world record pace. On January 7th, 2017, he went on to get a world record of 4 hours and 42 minutes, nearly a 2-minute improvement. 2 days later, he followed this up with a run where he was on track to secure another world record. He happened to have low health at just the perfect time to route in a rare death warp strategy in Dragon Rock. All he needed to do was choose not to use his revive item and select save.
Wait. Hang on, what did I just do? Oh shit, I don't think I saved. Yep, that's hilarious. Dude, never doing that again. Run's dead.
He got confused by the Japanese text and accidentally skipped saving, killing his run entirely. I never mentioned this, but runners choose to run on the Japanese version because it saves 10 seconds over the entire run due to faster dialogue boxes. This was a tragic way to lose a run, but the grind was far from over. Going into Walled City 2, he was 6 minutes ahead of world record pace. All he had to do was nail Sunstone early in the final air swim.
Wait, I don't know if that's gonna make it. No! Dude, I hate everything. I hate everything. Oh my god, I literally hate everything.
This was a big mistake, but not a run killer. He went from 6 minutes ahead to just under 4 minutes ahead. He was able to hit the trick on his second attempt, and he got the final air swim without any issues.
Photo 3903. I'm showing very little enthusiasm about this, aren't I? I'd like like a 436 actually, which is what this run could have potentially been. Could have been.
Only 4 days after his previous record, he finished the run with a time of 4 hours and 39 minutes, a 3-minute improvement, but he knew he could do better. 10 days later, he got a run nearly a minute ahead of his previous run. He made a few mistakes, missing window jump and getting a second try moonstone, but he had the chance to fix his large mistakes in Walled City 2. All he needed was a clean sunstone early. Just like that, he jumped to 3 minutes ahead of world record, and it was time to bring the run home.
435. Fuck yes. Fuck yeah. 435. First session was 3 tries, the second one was 4 tries. That's so dumb. What happened? Oh yeah, dumb sharp claw race. Then I fuck up window jump. Spillstone 3, failed it 3 times. I'm surprised I didn't lose as much time as I did. So, that's that.
Jub skipped directly past his goal of 4 hours and 36 minutes, getting a final time of 4 hours and 35 minutes. And it turned out that Jub had a lot more to give. He lowered the world record again to a 4:33, then again to a 4:32. And just when we thought the run was approaching its limits, he got this insane run. Nearly every single split, he was gaining time, only making 2 major mistakes. First, he missed a cycle on King Redeye. Next, he was rusty on the setup for the new Dragon Rock barrel clip, so he lost a minute when he failed the trick and tried to remember the setup. But everything else was just exceptional. He recovered substantial lost time by golding in Ocean Force Point Temple 2. The world record now hinged on executing the difficult Walled City 2 glitches.
I'm skeptical as fuck. Skeptical as fuck. Okay. We're in. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sunstone's down. I haven't PB'd in forever, dude. Come on. It's been a while. Please upload it. Okay. Okay, here we go. That should be fine. That should be fine. That should be fine. Will this run PB? Yes, it will.
Not only did he nail the glitches, he golded this section too. Going into Andros, he had a sizable lead and just needed to finish out the run.
Oh my god, this was a run. This was some run. This was a fucking run. Oh my god.
And on May 2nd, 2017, he ended with an insane time of 4 hours and 30 minutes. Jub had his sights on a sub 4:30 run, but little did he know that a new discovery was going to make it easier for him. BBQR discovered a faster method of performing Baby Cloud Runner skip. By doing a glitchy backpedal into the wind tunnel, Fox could gain wind flag storage without the cutscene queuing method. With the wind flag stored, we could then enter the tunnel from the middle and drop down into the basement early. This saves 2 minutes over the previous strategy, since it skips the cutscene and allows for us to use the old skip where we clip a barrel through the wall to skip opening the gate. Additionally, he brought back the early spire damage trick, which up until now had only been used by Samurai Man and Usiku. I've been putting off covering Dragon Rock, so before we get into his runs, let's break it down. Dragon Rock is the smallest dungeon in the game, probably due to a rushed development. In fact, the lower map shown here was actually never released. It exists in the game files, but it's not accessible. This will be an interesting detail later, but for now let's move on. So, we arrive in the R-Wing, head to the one and only building on the map, where we do a short barrel escort puzzle. We climb up, grab an explosive barrel, guide it through some flames using a suction device, and blow open a wooden door. Inside, we flip a switch to open a prison gate on the other side of the map. We then do a long walk across the map to meet up with the now freed Earthwalker, who we then ride as a mount and use to destroy 4 power generators throughout the map. Destroying these generators deactivates the shields on the 4 flying robot enemies, so we dismount and do yet another trip around the map to shoot down these robots. Killing the final robot causes a gate to open, so of course we head inside where we find the imprisoned high-top dinosaur. To free this dinosaur, we must shoot 4 switches, which triggers a long cutscene followed by an even longer, boring auto-scroller. We then spend the next few minutes shooting down the ships that spawn, while the high-top takes the longest possible route at a snail's pace to his destination. Once we arrive, the high-top opens a gate leading to a small new area. Once we open the high-top door, we do the wind tunnel barrel escort puzzle that we already covered. We then pull a switch to center the cage, which allows us to use flame on the grate below. This burns the rope, freeing the imprisoned Cloud Runner. At this point, we speak to the Cloud Runner to trigger yet another auto-scroller. However, unlike the previous auto-scroller, this one can be sped up with skill. The Cloud Runner will simply fly in laps repeatedly around Dragon Rock until you shoot down all 4 towers, after which the Dracor fight starts. Due to a forced camera angle, we can only shoot at 1 tower at any given time. As we already know, the final tower is briefly on the screen when entering the auto-scroller controller, allowing us to get in some early hits. So Jub got back to grinding with this new minor time save, as well as the 2-minute time save from the new Baby Cloud Runner skip. Additionally, he improved the overall fuel cell routing to cut out some of the slower fuel cells. He was executing the puzzles better and getting better at the difficult out-of-bounds tricks used throughout the run. Putting this all together, he was able to climb 4 minutes above world record pace. As always, the fate of the run hinged on the difficult Walled City 2 glitches.
Should be good. I don't know. Man, I don't know. CRT, I don't know.
He wasn't sure if he accidentally hit the save trigger. If he did, the run was over. He would be soft-locked inside the underground chamber. And it worked.
Okay. Yes. I think this is it.
With the hard tricks out of the way, he just needed to go and collect his world record.
4:26:16.
He ended with a final time of 4 hours and 26 minutes. At this point, it was becoming increasingly difficult to save more time, so he was looking to squeeze out more everywhere he could find it. He started practicing harder new tricks like fire walking, where Fox solves this puzzle while standing in fire and taking damage. This skips the safer method of using freeze blast to put out the fire on the platform, saving 10 seconds or so. Jub was also starting to become highly consistent at second room core kills, allowing him to maintain his insane paces.
For 25:09. So next PB is obviously going to be 25 sub. Has to be.
Jub improved the world record to 4 hours and 25 minutes, but he had his sights on sub 25.
Oh my god. Oh my god! I golded. Again. 8 seconds. What? Dude, I can 23. I can 24 sub. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. I thought that wasn't gonna make it. Here we go. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. That should be fine. There's no reason that shouldn't work. And it's absolutely fine. This is going to be a 23. Everyone's happy. Here we go. So once again, that's it for me. Take my leave once more.
And just like that, on October 5th, 2017, Jub finished with a time of 4 hours and 23 minutes, crossing 2-minute barriers yet again. Jub was more than content with what he had just accomplished, so he took another long break from the game. After 12 consecutive world records, I think he deserved it. So who would step up to challenge Jub's insane record? For 8 months, there would be absolute radio silence. No runners were even within 15 minutes of Jub. So this next challenger would end up being Jub again. He came back from his leave to push the game even further. This Jub was on a new level. Just take a look at how his execution had evolved over the years. This is what I mean when I say that his execution was getting better. Run after run, he was saving small bits of time here and there. In a game this long, these minor improvements can really stack up. And speaking of small time saves, he finally started doing the Cloud Runner Fortress box clip, which saves 5 seconds. Up until now, he had been shooting the box so that it wouldn't interfere with the timed cycle he needed to make. All other improvements would just be from pure execution, and this run kept getting gold after gold after gold after gold after gold. Going into Andros, he had a massive lead and just needed to bring it home.
Okay.
And just like that, on June 24th, 2018, Jub got his 13th consecutive world record with a time of 4 hours and 22 minutes. This run would be incredibly difficult to beat without new skips, and there just happened to be one on the horizon. In BBQR's TAS, he had been using a TAS-only trick referred to as either waterfall clip or waterfall skip. This trick allows Fox to go underneath the river while staying out of bounds, giving a more direct route to the underground chamber. This trick saves 30 seconds on King Red early and another 30 when turning in the sun and moonstones. RTA runners instead go very far out of the way to swim around this river entirely. Jub decided to start looking into an RTA viable setup. There is a difficult setup where Fox can do a water plane transfer to the upper river, then clip partially inbounds to cancel the air swim. After this, we can perform a precise gravity dive and just barely make it to the other side. Walled City 2 was already a notorious run killer due to the difficulty of Sunstone early and the save trigger skip, so this new trick would only make things worse. Jub's run was already pretty optimized at this time, so getting a run with 2 waterfall skips and matching splits was going to be a difficult feat for any runner. The next era ranges from 2018 to 2020, and I'll call it the optimization era. During this era, a few glitches were discovered, but none that saved substantial time. As a result, runners had no choice but to optimize the existing route. This meant routing in all of the hardest tricks, including waterfall skip. Even though the new discoveries didn't save much time, they are still important to mention. These tricks were all found by a long-standing runner and glitch hunter by the name of Dark-X-Rane. Dark-X-Rane discovered an optimization during the Crystal intro to break crates using a basket instead of an explosive barrel, saving 1 whole second. Dark-X-Rane also discovered a cutscene overlap, which requires shooting a tree at the same time that we save the first gatekeeper. If timed just right, the cutscene of the tree falling will overlap with the gatekeeper cutscene. We normally shoot this tree during the blowhorn event, so doing it now saves 7 seconds. Finally, Dark-X-Rane also found a very difficult cutscene skip that saves 20 seconds if executed near perfectly. The idea was to use an airswim to bypass the long cutscene that plays on the way to the portal device door that unlocks Walled City. However, the out-of-bounds navigation required is incredibly precise. In fact, this trick is so difficult that no runner has implemented it in a world record run. To this day, runners choose not to use this skip since it's too risky and too precise. And those are all the time-saving tricks of this era. Now allow me to introduce you to a runner by the name of Celestial Derp. He had quietly been submitting runs for 2 years at this point, lurking behind Jub from second place. However, he was about to kick things into the next gear and grind the new route. He was using every trick at his disposal, and on August 12th, 2019, he got this run. He got the new Garunda cutscene overlap. He was doing setupless ice block skips, where instead of stopping to line up like most runners do, he just goes for it. He was nailing the fast seam walks. He optimized the fuel cell route even more, and this run was starting to look like a world record contender. This run was just barely ahead of world record pace, but Celestial wanted to put the final nail in the coffin, and he got the very first waterfall skip that we've ever seen in a run. Thanks to this trick and great execution so far, he was now a minute ahead of world record pace. But then he took a silly death in Moon Mountain Pass, losing 25 seconds. He just barely escaped Firewalk alive, but he got the time save there. He even routed his health during the Blowhorn event for a crazy Death Warp time save, saving 10 seconds over the typical save warp. He was now 45 seconds ahead of world record and just needed to maintain his pace. This run was looking great. Celestial was still 30 seconds ahead of world record, and as always, the entire fate of this run hinged on Walled City 2. He executed Sunstone early incredibly fast. In fact, it was fast enough to just barely hit a puzzle cycle, saving some extra time. Everything was going perfectly. He just had to hit the last waterfall skip on the way to turning in the Sun and Moonstones. Sadly, he ended up clipping back in bounds and he had to save quit reload to reattempt it. This single mistake destroyed his world record pace entirely. However, he could still get a personal best, so he continued on, getting the trick on his second try. Going into Andros, he was 7 seconds behind the world record. Now, there was a theoretical way he could still get the world record. All he would need to do is pull off a trick called Early Hands. To give an idea of how hard this trick is, the only run I've ever mentioned so far that has pulled off this trick was the TAS. You heard that right, no human had ever pulled this off in a world record run. Just look at how precise this is in BDQR's TAS. This trick requires destroying both of Andros's hands right before they become invulnerable again. If successful, this skips an entire sub-phase of the fight. At the exact moment that you kill one of his hands, you need to quickly roll and shoot the other hand. This trick requires insane mashing speed and precision, so surely it wasn't going to happen this time, right? Celestial had done the impossible. He got early hands. His last shot just barely hit the hitbox poking out from Andros's hand right before the invulnerability phase. This put him back on world record pace. He landed the final killing blow, clutching out a world record by only 1 second.
World record. Fucking world record. Let's go. Oh my god, I fucking did it. Early hand saved the world record. Oh my god, clutchest moments in speedruns. Actually, the clutchest moments in speedruns.
This was absolutely amazing, however Celestial wasn't done. He wanted to clean up his splits as much as possible, and so he continued the grind. He got a run that was nearly a minute ahead of his world record, but tragically he encountered a strange glitch where Thorntail Hollow failed to load, soft-locking and killing his run. Fortunately, on October 16th, 2019, he was able to finally get a run and lower the world record by another 17 seconds. This time, his world record wasn't carried by early hands, but rather improved execution on his other splits. Additionally, he developed a new quick kill strategy in the Cloudrunner Fortress race. This was a strategy where we slam into the Sharp Claw carrying the Spellstone at just the right time to manipulate them into running into a wall. Afterwards, we can chain multiple consecutive hits and kill them near instantly. It's time for a quick detailed breakdown of this map. At the end of Cloudrunner Fortress, the second dungeon, we climb down a ladder into the boss room. After watching a cutscene, a race begins. Up until now, a typical runner would finish the race between 1 and 2 laps. However, with this new manip, the task can kill the enemy here, and RTA could reliably kill the enemy here. Back to the runs, Celestial lowered the world record again 3 months later by an additional 12 seconds on January 19th, 2020. The next goal was obvious, he wanted to get sub 422. After enough grinding, he eventually got a run that was looking promising.
Oh my god. That is a world record. That is a hell of a world record.
Celestial had done it. On March 22nd, 2020, he finished a run with no major mistakes and all of the hard tricks. This allowed him to skip an entire minute barrier directly into 420. Crazy enough, 2 months later, he managed to squeeze out another 18 seconds. At this point, this run was becoming incredibly optimized, but Celestial knew that sub 420 was possible, and he wanted to be the first to get it. This would mean that not only did he need a run with no major mistakes, but a run with almost no minor mistakes either. After many attempts, he got this run.
Alright, does the run live or die? Oh my god, the run lives. Oh my god, any percent is dead. Oh my god. It's over. It's finally over. The only really bad section in the entire run is Krazoa 5, and that's mostly because I missed my shot for the early cycle at Sunstone. But this was such a good run. Oh my goodness. This is such a good run. I have been running this game for 3.5 years. I started in the middle of 2017, and it has been an incredible grind to get down to these kinds of times.
Celestial had done the impossible yet again. On November 13th, 2020, Celestial got a run of 4 hours and 19 minutes, crossing the minute barrier. At this point, the category felt dead. Celestial took a break for personal reasons, and Jub Jub was effectively retired, and no contenders were showing up. I suppose now is a good time to introduce myself. I'm Zach, and I'm a game developer, game hacker, and glitch hunter. I find breaking video games to be quite fun, and apparently I've got a bit of a knack for it. I've found major glitches in a variety of games, such as Twilight Princess, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, Exodus from the Earth, and SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom. So I directed my attention now to Star Fox Adventures, and oh boy did I find some stuff. But first, a quick interlude. This video has taken me quite a bit of time to make, so I hope you don't mind if I shamelessly plug some of my projects, which you should check out if they're interesting to you. Currently, I am working on a game called Pantomime, which is a collection of high-quality language learning games. Some are story-driven and similar to games like Heavy Rain or Detroit Become Human, and others are more puzzle-driven, similar to games like Portal. For now, it's only English, but we plan to start adding more languages soon. Check it out on Steam or let us know on our website which language you want to see next. Additionally, I also made a game called Squally, where you use arbitrary code execution to solve puzzles. It teaches x86 and x64 assembly language, which is a useful skill for reverse engineering games, especially PC games. Squally works by allowing you to stop time and rewrite the game's code in assembly, guiding you through the entire process. So, for those of you wanting to learn some of the skills that expert glitch hunters use, this is a great place to start. Now let's get back to what we're all here for. First, we need to travel back in time a bit. In 2009, the Panda Girl 789 uploaded this potato quality video to YouTube where she fell off a ledge as Crystal, but instead of respawning as Crystal, she respawned as Fox in the last dungeon of the game. It would take us an additional 8 years to figure out the exact cause. In fact, several of the YouTube comments thought the video was a hoax. In 2017, NarbeVoguel discovered how to reproduce this glitch. She discovered that certain respawn checkpoints remained active even after switching save files, allowing for wrong warping to the location of another file. I'll cover exactly how this works later. For now, just know that this glitch can only be performed at 23 special checkpoints scattered throughout the game. These checkpoints are usually placed before events and minigames, so we call this glitch Event Storage Warp, or ESW. The community descended into chaos as they decided whether or not to allow pre-made files in any %. A few other notable communities allow it, so why not Star Fox Adventures as well? After months of furious debating, the category was split out into New Game Plus. Pre-made files were now banned in any %, but the community also made a major mistake. ESW was now also banned from any %. The community arguments over ESWs left a lot of scars, and it became taboo to even discuss the topic. In fact, I didn't know much about the glitch until Dark-X-Rane DM'd me on Discord. He told me this game had a secret wrong warp glitch, and I was intrigued. Dark-X-Rane and I wanted to get the trick unbanned, but to do that, we would need to prove that it could save time without the use of a pre-made file. So, the first thing I did was I created a visual route of the any % category. This was mostly for me to keep my sanity, because memorizing all of the dependencies in this game was too much for me to keep track of. I ended up creating a 27-page PDF of all the major route dependencies. Through this work, I gained a better understanding of the route. My contribution is that I did some math and I realized that ESWs could actually save a small amount of time without a pre-made file. Instead, runners would create 2 files. This meant that runners had to play the very first part of the intro twice, because frustratingly, you can't copy files from the menu, and the option to save the game isn't unlocked until 5 minutes into the route. However, I eventually proved that we could gain back this lost time and even save a couple minutes by using this old ESW trick to frequently warp between the 2 files. As a result, Dark-X-Rane and I got this trick unbanned with the help of Jub, who was interested in trying the new route. The most obvious change is that we could now obtain Krazoa 3 early, and use an event storage warp to escape from the underground shrine. I'll cover this in detail later, but first we need to learn more about how ESWs actually work. This game stores all savable information in a continuous chunk of memory known as game bits. Technically, there are 4 subregions of game bits, but for the purposes of this trick, we will think of it as 2 regions. The first region we call low flags, and these contain information like health, mana, upgrades, inventory, save location, and so on. The second region we call high flags, and these contain information like Fox's respawn location, as well as the map data like which objects are loaded. There are several versions of this data that coexist. First, there is one set of game bits for each of the 3 save slots on the memory card. When the player loads a save slot, it gets copied into active data. Now when the player makes progress, the active data gets updated. In other words, active data is unsaved progress. Next is save checkpoint data. Whenever the player hits a save checkpoint, active data is copied into save checkpoint data. If the player dies, this gets copied back into active data. Finally, we have optional respawn checkpoint data. You can just think of this as a higher priority save checkpoint. This data is not always present. If the player hits a respawn checkpoint, it gets created. Now if the player dies, respawn data is loaded instead of the save checkpoint data. This is the type of checkpoint used by Event Storage Warp, and as mentioned earlier, there are only 23 known respawn checkpoints in the entire game. Another detail to note is that if the player hits a save checkpoint, respawn data is destroyed. However, due to a developer oversight, quitting to the title screen does not destroy the respawn data. This means that if we hit a respawn checkpoint on one file, then if we load another file and die, the game respawns us with the data of the first file. This is known as a reverse event storage warp, but I'll just be referring to it as a file copy warp because all it does is clone a file. We can then manually save to persist the new data to the memory card. However, this is where things get really weird. When the player manually saves, not only does the data get copied into the memory card like you would expect, but low flags are also copied from the active data into the save checkpoint data and respawn checkpoint data if it exists. It turns out that we can heavily abuse this fact to cross-pollinate save files, so to speak. For example, we can hit a respawn checkpoint on file A, load file B, and then save on file B. And this will cause our respawn data to contain the location of file A, but the progress of file B. Once we die, this cross-pollinated respawn data overwrites the active data. This is what we have been calling a regular ESW. Now I quickly need to cover more death mechanics. If the player dies from losing their health, they are prompted to save. If the player dies from falling into the void, they are not prompted to save. The method of dying does not influence the trick. Death by void is equivalent to dying from losing all health and declining the save prompt. Saving before jumping into a void is equivalent to dying from losing all health and accepting the save prompt. Regardless of the death method, the game will always try to load respawn checkpoint data first, otherwise it falls back on regular save checkpoint data. Later we discovered 3 new advanced ESW strategies. The goal of every ESW is always the same. We want to set up glitched respawn checkpoint data, then die to load it. First, I discovered same file warping. This strategy requires hitting a respawn checkpoint, quitting without saving, then reloading the same file. Because we never saved, we are now back in time, so to speak, and appear to have lost all our progress. However, we still have our respawn checkpoint data from the future. We can then save to merge the past and future data. And as always, we simply die to load this merged data. This allows us to revert our inventory to a back-in-time state while warping to a location in the future. While this sounds useless, there are some theoretical applications. For example, if you save before spending 5 fuel cells to fly to Dark Ice Mines, you could hit a respawn checkpoint in that dungeon, then quit without saving. You would now have a save file with 5 fuel cells in Thorntail and a respawn checkpoint with 0 fuel cells in Dark Ice Mines. We can then die and save to merge the file data. The result would be respawn data with 5 fuel cells in Dark Ice Mines, essentially giving you a refund for your fuel cells. Sadly, due to how this game handles dungeon progression, even if we use this trick, we will just be forced to spend the fuel cells later, so this strategy does not save any time. Next, I realized we could perform an ESW without dying on the second file, instead dying on the first file. By hitting a respawn checkpoint on file 1, saving on file 2, then dying on file 1, we can essentially perform an event storage warp to escape areas where we can't normally die. This is known as a proxy ESW. This could potentially solve any problems where we need to warp out of an enclosed area. For example, if we ever solved K4 early, this would be a potential strategy to escape. The last discovery was by BVQR, and I'll refer to this as a slingshot warp, although as a joke, we sometimes call this a reverse event storage warp. Normally, an ESW allows us to warp from any location in one file to one of the 23 ESW checkpoints. checkpoints. This new technique does the opposite, allowing us to warp from any of the 23 checkpoints to the location of any other file regardless of its location. This is done by performing a file copy warp and then immediately save quit reloading. This works because there are two different respawn positions saved in game bits. In low flags we have save position, but in high flags we have respawn position. By immediately save quit reloading, we load back in at the save position. Laying this all out, we have event storage warp, where we warp to any ESW checkpoint from any location in another file. We have file copy warp, where we copy a file at any ESW checkpoint. We have slingshot warp, where we warp from an ESW checkpoint to the position of any other save file. We have same file warps, where we revert our inventory to a prior state at any ESW checkpoint. And finally, we have proxy ESWs, where we perform an ESW without dying on the second file, instead dying on the first file. At first, we only knew about 18 of the 23 ESW checkpoints. These were discovered by various people, including the PandaGirl789, NarbeVoguel, Celestial Derp, Keanu23898, and BVQR. Frustratingly, all of the ESW checkpoints that we knew about were in dungeons. This meant that every time we did an ESW to warp to these checkpoints, we would have to spend 1.5 minutes flying back to Thorntail in the R-Wing. I wanted to know if there was something more useful, so I carefully went through the game searching for checkpoints and I found the last 5. In the end, 22 of the 23 checkpoints were scattered throughout various dungeons. However, the last one ended up being incredibly useful. I had discovered an ESW checkpoint in Thorntail Hollow, the only ESW on Dinosaur Planet. Specifically, this checkpoint is right before a minigame in Thorntail Hollow where we must defend some eggs that are being attacked. To quickly explain this event, after turning in the third Krazoa spirit and returning to Thorntail, this event is now active. Completing it grants us the Portal Device Staff upgrade, which we can use to open special portal device doors. Additionally, this is what allows us to unlock the dungeon Walled City, since we learn that Tricky's dad is a gatekeeper and he sealed his powers inside a portal device door behind the Queen Earthwalker. Unfortunately, the respawn checkpoint for this event is only active while the minigame is active. Since we need to turn in K3 to start it, this meant that for K3 early, we would have to use a different ESW checkpoint. To set up K3 early, we use the respawn checkpoint at the entrance to Dark Ice Mines. This trick requires using 2 ESWs. First, we use a file copy warp to clone our file at this checkpoint. Then, after we collect K3, we save quit and load our copied file in Dark Ice Mines, and reactivate the ESW checkpoint. We then reload the K3 file, roll off a ladder, and die. We then save when prompted, which merges the active data and the respawn data. As a result, we respawn in Dark Ice Mines, but now have K3 collected. Many months later, Dark-X-Rane found an improvement to the death strategy that involved falling off some boxes at a specific angle. If done correctly, Fox just has barely enough height to die, saving an additional 10 seconds by skipping the need to climb the long ladder. An interesting consequence of K3 early is that we no longer needed to turn in Spellstone 2 at the intended time. Turning in Spellstone 2 has 2 consequences. First, it grants us access to the Lightfoot Village minigames, which we complete to access the 3rd Krazoa Shrine. K3 early makes this obsolete. The second effect of turning in Spellstone 2 is that it allows us to place Spellstone 4. This meant that instead of making 2 trips to Ocean Force Point Temple, we could bring Spellstone 2 and 4 at the same time in 1 trip. However, this isn't as easy as it sounds. To get to the temple, we first need to pass through Cape Claw. In fact, we visit Cape Claw 3 separate times in the run. I had the realization that we could potentially skip Cape Claw 2, but first, let's learn a bit about how Cape Claw works. In Cape Claw 1, we airswim in, and here we obtain 4 gold bars to pay the high top dinosaur. This lowers a ladder leading to a switch, and pulling the switch opens the gate leading to a puzzle where we push blocks over gas vents. Solving this puzzle frees the Queen Cloudrunner, gatekeeper of the second dungeon Cloudrunner Fortress, granting us access to that dungeon. As we've covered before, during Cape Claw 2 we perform a second air swim and collect 2 fire gems to open the door, granting us access to Ocean Force Point Temple 1. After solving all the puzzles, we turn in Spellstone 2. By the time we get to Cape Claw 3, we've upgraded our Scarab Bag capacity enough to finally pay the tollgate normally. The Krazoa statue entrance that leads to the temple is boarded up, so we use a nearby cannon to reopen the path to Ocean Force Point Temple 2. Here we solve a new set of puzzles and finally turn in Spellstone 4. The problem with skipping Cape Claw 2 is that it causes really strange side effects in Cape Claw 3. Normally, collecting one of the fire gems causes the water flooding the statue to drain. Since we never drained the water, after bombing the wooden door blocking the statue, we can simply walk into it and start an air swim. This is great because we can use this air swim to bypass the fire gem door. However, once we place the spell stones and try to leave, we would be stuck behind this door. The obvious solution is to try to use an ESW to warp out, but frustratingly this doesn't work. Due to a developer mistake, the story flags indicating that we place spellstones 2 and 4 are stored in high flags when they should have been stored in low flags. Because of this, these flags are cleared if we attempt to perform an ESW to escape. Also, even if we got past the fire gem door, we are still blocked by the Sharpclaw disguise door that we never opened either. This door is normally opened in Cape Claw 2 by stepping on the Sharpclaw panel. However, in Cape Claw 3, a rock spawns on top of this panel and disables it. Additionally, we can't dive low enough to leave through the main entrance, plus an invisible wall blocks it anyways. So skipping Cape Claw 2 seemed to be a soft lock. However, once we learned more about ESWs, we developed a complex strategy to solve this problem. By saving in Cape Claw 1, we could combine a file copy warp, a slingshot warp, and a regular ESW, allowing us to warp from Cloudrunner Fortress to Cape Claw 2, where we open the Sharpclaw disguise door, grab one of the 2 fire gems, and warp right back to Cloudrunner Fortress. This is the cool part. We don't actually need the other fire gem. I found a crazy glitch where we can escape Ocean Force Point Temple by placing one of the 2 fire gems from behind. When the animation plays, it clips us through the door, allowing us to leave without ever having opened it. The rock mentioned earlier is blocking the path, but the collision from behind is faulty, so we can roll right past it. Around this time, Dark-X-Rane was putting in serious work on trying to find Krazoa 4 early. Dark-X-Rane and BVQR both found separate methods for getting very close to bypassing the gate, but the collision extends too far out of bounds to get around it. Also, BVQR discovered that by turning the camera and zooming, Tricky would teleport into the cage with us. From here, we can then beat Tricky with our staff until he shoots out flames and kills us. This meant that if we ever found a way into the cage, we now had a method of dying to perform a regular ESW to escape. At the time this was discovered, we didn't know about the proxy ESW strategy, and a regular ESW was faster anyways, so this was a nice find. Now this isn't relevant to any percent, but I thought it was important to share. BVQR found an insane tasks-only discovery. But first, I need to address a lie that I told earlier. I said that we could only control Fox's air swim height briefly while diving into water. However, in 2014, Serpent discovered that chaining staff swings together would keep Fox submerged underwater. The only problem is that there is a 4-frame window to chain these staff swings, and if you miss it, Fox starts swimming and rises to the surface of the water. In other words, this technique is not very RTA friendly. In 2020, BVQR figured out that a task could perform over 100 consecutive staff swings to keep Fox submerged at a plane below the K4 cage. Then we simply stop swinging at just the right time to rise into the cage. Normally, this would just be a soft lock as you would be stuck swimming inside the K4 cage with no way to cancel it. However, remember earlier when I said that cutscenes cancel air swims? Well, it turns out the first time you collect an item, a cutscene plays, and there happens to be 2 fuel cells in the cage. So we avoid fuel cells until this moment and use the item discovery cutscene to cancel the swim. It was great to see that it was possible for a task to get K4 early, but we were going to need something better than this, and ideally something that a human could do. Sometime later, Dark-X-Rane found something interesting. He noticed that when moving the camera out of bounds in Thorntail Hollow repeatedly, eventually the game would freeze up. This was due to the game running out of memory. He also noticed that this would cause some areas to detexture. In version 1.0 of the game, the detextured areas would appear rainbow. On version 1.1, they would appear gray. Dark-X-Rane's memory leak discovery was new, but detexturing was first documented in 2010 by none other than Kazooie. However, we never really understood the mechanics until now. When Dark-X-Rane found the memory leak, I looked around to see if anybody had done any work reverse engineering Star Fox Adventures, and we got incredibly lucky. I found a GitHub repo belonging to Reina Kunisaki. Reina had been quietly reverse engineering Star Fox Adventures for quite some time. For the most part, this was so that Reina could develop the Amethyst mod, which is a patch that allows you to play the entire game as Crystal. Additionally, Reina also created the map viewer, which allows us to see where triggers are, which would become invaluable to glitch hunting this game. Through this work, Reina became the world expert in Star Fox Adventures Adventure's internals. I reached out to Reina to see if they had any insights regarding the memory leak, and as a result, Reina joined the SFA speedrunning Discord, which was a huge win for the community. Getting back to the discovery, Dark-X-Rane noticed that mana crystals were not properly getting cleaned up when the map was unloaded. Reina informed us that the crash happened when either the game runs out of visual effects slots or heap memory. As for the detexturing, the exact cause was unknown, but Reina informed us that only 2 maps are loaded at any given time. For some unknown reason, by moving the camera out of bounds in certain locations, the game attempts to load the world map files. This seems to count as the second map, and after performing this glitch and attempting to load a third map, the game loads it in a detextured state. We noticed that in addition to the new area being detextured, some objects would also appear as cubes. More importantly, some of these cube objects no longer had collision. In June of 2021, I discovered that by moving the camera out of bounds while doing the Dark Ice Mines early airswim, we could load the Snowhorn Waste maps in a detextured state. A side effect of this is that we could walk right past the K4 gate. And just like that, one of the holy grails of Star Fox Adventure speedrunning was solved. I do want to give most of the credit to Dark-X-Rane here. At this point, I had actually somewhat given up on glitch hunting this game because I was simply running out of ideas. When he found the detexturing glitch, I immediately jumped back into glitch hunting and pretty much sniped the K4 discovery from him. He spent actual years looking for this glitch and got us 90% of the way there. All I did was come in and do the last 10%. As we discussed earlier, this now meant that we could skip the Snowhorn artifact, the large Scarab Bag upgrade, and Spellstone 3. It also allowed for Dark Ice Mines early, skipping the Snowhorn Waste key, the white grub tubs, and the Firefly lantern. Additionally, there were some other side effects. This route change meant that we would need to do an airswim for Cave Claw 3, since we now skipped the last 2 Scarab Bag upgrades. But this is totally fine, and since we no longer need Spellstone 3, we no longer need to kill the King Red Eye boss, which means we no longer need to do Walled City 1 at all. As a result, this also cut out one of the 2 difficult waterfall skips. So with Walled City 1 skipped, the new Walled City 2 route is as follows. We arrive in the R-Wing, do an air swim to collect Moonstone early, then save warp back out. We do another air swim for Sunstone early, and save warp out. We then do the 3rd difficult air swim with the waterfall skip, turn in the stones, and save warp out again. From here, it's the typical route of walking up the now raised temple, warping to the 5th Krazoa Shrine, completing the simple puzzles inside, warping back out, then we leave via the R-Wing and go finish the game. To recap all the major skips, we now skip placing Spellstone 1, place Spellstone 2 late, skip Spellstone 3 entirely, skip K2, collect K3 early, and collect K4 early. With how much time save there was, the world record was pretty much free. Jub seized the opportunity and would be the first runner to learn the new route. This run looked drastically different than what we've seen before. After a typical early game, it was time for the first ever Dark Ice Mines early air swim. Rather than doing the precise setup to get the correct waterfall air swim height, he opted to use a safe but slower strat that always gives the correct height. This avoids the need to clip into the sewer from above, instead allowing Jub to go directly into the water. He then did the hypothermia swimming into the loading triggers, just barely surviving with 1 health, successfully pulling off the first ever Dark Ice Mines early in a run. Next up was K3 early. The air swims and out of bounds movement are identical to Cape Claw early, so Jub didn't break a sweat on this trick. He routed his health perfectly so that he could easily fall off the ladder and perform the ESW to escape to Dark Ice Mines. Unfortunately, later in the run, he messed up the complicated sequence of ESWs to warp to Cape Claw 2, so he ended up having to air swim there instead, losing several minutes. After this, Jub does something interesting, collecting Freeze Blast quite late. This is because we only use it in the late game now, so we don't need to grab it at the intended time anymore. Also, by doing it this late, Jub can warp to a cloned file at the Thorntail ESW checkpoint. This cuts out a long run back, saving over a minute. Next up was K4 early. He pulled off the air swim, out of bounds navigation, and detexturing glitch, walking right past the K4 gate. He routed his health perfectly yet again and beat Tricky into flaming him to ESW out of the cage. We now have the very first K4 early ever seen in a run. Last but not least, he used the new Fire Gem clip to successfully escape Ocean Force Point Temple. All of these tricks put him massively ahead, but there were some major mistakes that lost him significant time. He failed Baby Cloud Runner skip once, he failed Sunstone early once, and he messed up the new fuel cell route. However, the new time saves were more than enough to propel him into a world record of 4 hours and 16 minutes on July 7th, 2021. A little over a month later, on August 21st, 2021, he lowered the record again to 4 hours and 10 minutes. This run still had several major mistakes, and the community was eager for an optimized run. However, Jub wasn't running the game as frequently, which no one can really blame him for. This run takes over 4 hours, and it was difficult to complete a run without making a major mistake. So, the community would be waiting for quite some time. But 4 months later, he came back with this run. He pulled off Dark Ice Mines early, surviving the hypothermia swim with only 2 health left. K3 early went as expected, and this time he pulled off the crazy event storage warp sequence in Cape Claw, allowing him to open the disguise door, grab the fire gem, and warp right back to Cloudrunner Fortress. When performing K4 early, he unfortunately swam into the void, soft locking and losing 4 minutes, but he got the trick on his next try. He also clipped back in bounds during the Cape Claw 3 air swim, losing another minute. Fortunately, he also landed this trick on the next try. He was now 5 minutes ahead of world record pace and just needed to avoid any mistakes in the endgame. First up, Moonstone early, and no issues there. Next was the harder Sunstone early. He got the dive into the temple and did the out of bounds with no problems. The notoriously difficult waterfall skip gave him no troubles either. He avoided the run-killing soft lock, and as always, he just needed to close out the run. And just like that, he got another massive world record with a time of 4 hours and 4 minutes. Considering he lost 5 minutes to major mistakes, everybody knew that sub 4 was possible. The race for sub 4 was on, or at least it was supposed to be. Before that could happen, we made even more strange discoveries. I accidentally discovered something really weird. Normally, maps only load by hitting loading triggers. Each major map is separated by a link map. Link maps contain the necessary loading triggers to load the nearby maps. However, for some unknown reason, I found that we can just swim directly into Cape Claw from Lightfoot Village and still load it despite having never passed through a link map. By combining this new discovery with the detexturing glitch, we could now load Cape Claw 1 in a glitched state. From here, most objects are unloaded, including the Krazoa statue entrance, which is normally not accessible at all in Cape Claw 1. This meant that we could now enter the Krazoa statue and access a switch early that normally requires paying the high top dinosaur 4 gold bars. The new Cape Claw 1 route looked like this. We would use a Cape Claw air swim, but now entering through Lightfoot Village. We then drop into the Krazoa statue, pull the switch to skip the 4 gold bars, then save quit in the gas room. This causes the game to fix the detextured state, allowing us to solve the gas room puzzle. We then talk to the now freed gatekeeper as usual, unlocking Cloudrunner Fortress. This trick became known as Gold Bar Skip, and it saves about 3 minutes. With how much progress we made, I was inspired to keep digging. Specifically, I was hoping to save some time in Dark Ice Mines. Since we no longer need the blowhorn to collect K4, we now use the blowhorn exactly once in the entire run. Specifically, we use it to summon a mammoth to cross a blizzard to gain access to the bike that takes us to the interior Dark Ice Mines map. This begs the question, can we skip the blowhorn entirely? I wasn't just blindly looking for glitches, I had a few leads. The first discovery was by legendary glitch hunter Glitches and Stuff, who is famous for pioneering the use of stale reference manipulation in Ocarina of Time. In 2013, Glitches and Stuff found that in version 1.0 of the game, the first mammoth could be clipped through a wall to get out of bounds. Second, BVQR discovered that by hotkeying grubtub mushrooms, we could feed Tricky while riding the mammoth. This would activate a glitchy state where we control both Fox and the mammoth at the same time. This became known as dismount glitch. My goal was to see if we could get out of bounds on the first mammoth, which we have been skipping for years thanks to the gate deload trick. If I could pull this off, we could potentially cut out most of the exterior puzzles by skipping directly to the bike that takes us to the interior maps. After messing around with it, I eventually figured it out. By running into a certain wall at a precise angle, the first mammoth could be clipped into this wall. We could then navigate around the edge of the map while partially out of bounds. Next, we hit a loading trigger to spawn the bike, then use the dismount glitch to switch from the mammoth to the bike. And just like that, we had blowhorn skip, as well as skipping the Dark Ice Mines cannon, the Great Flaming minigame, and the second mammoth. However, I ended up finding even more than I bargained for. By doing this skip, we have Tricky at a time when we are not supposed to. Normally, when crossing the blizzard on the second mammoth, we lose Tricky in the blizzard and have to free him from the prison in the interior map. As a consequence, we can now feed Tricky while riding the snow bike, bike, allowing us to perform a second dismount glitch. This has a few effects. First, the camera goes absolutely wild, and second, it turns out that you can control both Fox and the bike at the same time. This is difficult because the bike works differently than the Mammoth. If you accidentally press A at any time, Fox warps back to the bike, canceling the dismount glitch. However, if you hold R to shield, you can now press A without warping to the bike, allowing the bike to accelerate. This is a stressful technique because if you accidentally forget to press R to shield, the dismount glitch is ruined. Using this technique, we can navigate through the entire mineshaft with Fox and the bike detached. It turns out that while Fox is detached from the bike, if the two get too far separated, Fox and the bike can no longer hit triggers. This is significant because at the end of the mineshaft, there is a cutscene trigger that causes Fox to lose his bike. Once we get near this trigger, we can ride the bike past this cutscene trigger, then press A to warp to the bike, bypassing this cutscene entirely. This allows us to ride the bike inside of the interior of Dark Ice Mines, which was never supposed to happen. We can then do a glitch where we clip our camera through a wall, causing the map to temporarily unload. As a result, the bike falls through the floor, allowing us to perform a difficult trick where we can just barely fall on a platform below. We can then ride the bike over a ledge. This causes Fox to grab the ledge, which activates the dismount glitch, detaching Fox from the bike yet again. This allows the bike to bypass an invisible wall, after which we press A to warp to the bike one last time. We then ride the bike into a save trigger and save quit reload to skip directly to the dungeon boss. This new skip cut out most of the exterior and all of the interior of Dark Ice Mines. Just look at the new route. We do the original glitchless intro, obtaining the alpine roots and feeding them to the mammoth, but we now take this mammoth and clip it through the wall following this path. We then load the bike and use the dismount glitch to switch to it, then do the crazy camera bike navigation after doing the next dismount glitch. From here, we drop directly into the boss teleporter room and take this teleporter after doing the save quit reload. This insane sequence of events came to be known as bike skip, and it saves about 8 minutes, essentially allowing us to collect Spellstone 1 early. Despite the massive time save, at this point, no runners were interested in implementing this glitch. Every part of this trick sucked. The mammoth out of bounds was difficult, and it had a tricky corner where it was easy to fall through the ground and lose a run. The insane camera made it incredibly difficult to navigate the mineshaft. Keeping Fox and the bike separated at the wrong time could cause you to miss loading triggers and fall through the floor. The fact that pressing A without shielding would instantly kill your run made it very easy to choke a run here. And finally, there was no good setup for either of the two bike drops at the end of the run, causing runners to believe that this trick was TAS only. So for now, sadly this trick went unused, but we weren't done finding glitches. A community member by the name of Lobster Zelda had been working on a new task and was very interested in finding a way to obtain Groundquake early. Now you may be confused, as we have been skipping Groundquake for years since it requires placing Spellstone 1, which we have also been skipping for years. So why on earth would Lobster Zelda possibly want this? Well, there actually is a very compelling reason for the task to want to obtain this spell. You see, we obtained Spellstone 1 for the sole purpose of obtaining Freeze Blast. Thanks to the numerous discoveries we've made, there is only one required use of Freeze Blast in the entire run: to put out the fires blocking the path to the 5th Krazoa Spirit. That's it. We spend over 20 minutes collecting Spellstone 1 and entering Volcano Force Point Temple 1 just to obtain Freeze Blast to put out the flames in this one room. However, remember when I talked about Kazui's Groundquake hover discovery? Well, BVQR figured out that these could be chained together. Now, each one of these hovers requires 2 frame-perfect inputs. Lobster Zelda figured out that with a very precise setup, the task has just enough magic to barely hover around the edges of the flames. Spell swapping does not work for hovers, so we would need normal Groundquake, and if we could find a way to get it in under 20 minutes, it would save time. So I accepted Lobster Zelda's challenge, and I started looking. I eventually found a solution that required 5 minutes of frame-perfect staff swings. This would allow us to hit some important loading loading triggers, after which we swim for several minutes to activate the detexturing glitch to finally unload the groundquake door. This technique took 10 minutes and would be incredibly painful to TAS. Fortunately, before Lobster Zelda added this trick to the TAS, a faster method was found. On December 31st, 2021, Lobster Zelda sent me an interesting video of a glitch uploaded by none other than Kazooie. Kazooie demonstrated that you could glitch the camera by feeding Tricky on the same frame that you attempt to enter a tunnel or climb a ladder. Additionally, by feeding Tricky afterwards, sometimes the camera would lock in place. Most of us had seen this video and thought, well, this is useless. But after all I learned about this game, I had a gut feeling that this wasn't so useless after all. It turned out that this glitch had unrealized potential. By locking the camera near a map boundary, we can disable Fox's ability to hit triggers on the next map. We immediately started looking for uses. First, we discovered that camlock could be used to deload the Moon Mountain Pass door, saving 3 minutes by skipping the beacon event needed to obtain the Moon Mountain Pass key. In addition, the same trick could be used to unload the groundquake door. This saved roughly 7 minutes over the previous task method. Instead of doing the crazy setup from before, we simply drop a lock in the Volcano Force Point Temple, then bypass the trigger that is responsible for loading the groundquake door. This wasn't the end of camlock discoveries. We found that this could be used to unload the Fire Gem door, as well as the Sharpclaw escape door. This meant that we no longer needed to collect any Fire Gems and could skip Cape Claw 2 entirely, saving a couple minutes. Last but not least, after skipping the Fire Gem door, we can keep our camlock storage. This allows us to use it to bypass a cutscene where the Queen talks to us after placing Spellstone 4, saving an additional minute. Combined, these glitches saved roughly 6 minutes in the any percent category and over 25 minutes in the tasks. 2 weeks later, I made an even bigger discovery. When looking at some game flags in Walled City, I realized that we misunderstood how Walled City actually worked. We assumed that turning in the Sun and Moonstones not only raised the temple, but activated the warp pad. In actuality, the warp pad is activated by placing Spellstone 4. This was a huge discovery because we already knew that if the outside area was unloaded, the temple is raised by default. If we could find a way to deload the exterior of Walled City, we could skip the Sun and Moonstones entirely. After digging around, I found a hilariously simple setup. We would perform the normal waterfall jump, then do a gravity dive into the Moon Temple. From here, we simply swim to hit the triggers that we would normally hit when entering the Moon Temple, while remaining out of bounds. Then we simply turn around and clip back and bounce outside the temple. The triggers that we hit deloaded the exterior, causing the temple to rise early. And because we placed Spellstone 4, the warp pad is active and we can just grab K5. This new glitch was an absolute game changer for Star Fox Adventures. Not only did it save 8 minutes, but it replaced several hard tricks with one easy trick. We now basically skipped all of Walled City 1 and 2. The new Walled City 2 was as such. We arrive in the R-Wing, perform an air swim to raise the central temple, warp to the K5 shrine, collect K5, and leave. No more waterfall skips, no more Moonstone, no more Sunstone, no more losing runs to getting permanently soft-locked in the underground chamber. With Jub Jub and Celestial on hiatus, and the world record being absolutely free, this left space for an outsider to come in. Enter Fuzziness. If that name sounds familiar to you, Fuzziness is a competitive Smash player who holds records in a variety of games, some of which you probably recognize. Dark-X-Rane convinced Fuzziness to give Star Fox Adventures a try, and so he got to practicing. After a couple months of learning the game, he noticed that in my route document I had listed bike skip as the most optimal strategy, and when Fuzziness learned that it saved 8 minutes, he couldn't resist trying the trick for himself. At first, he struggled, but eventually he found more consistent setups for all of the pain points of the trick. This would become a recurring theme. Fuzziness would never let somebody else tell him that a trick was too hard or task only. He would always try and decide for himself. Once he was comfortable with the route, he started grinding, and eventually he got this run. After the typical early game, it was time for the first major trick, Dark Ice Mines early. Fuzziness went for the optimal but precise setup that requires backing off in just the right spot to get the correct air swim height. He got the height and was able to clip into the sewers successfully. Now it was time for the hypothermia swimming. He hit the loading triggers, surviving with only 2 health. The next part of the run was the dreaded bike skip. He got the mammoth clip first try. He pulled off the difficult half and bounce navigation without falling. stalling. He swapped to the bike, and now it was time for the crazy camera section. He just needed to survive the next 2 minutes without accidentally getting turned around or warping to the bike.
That is a scary camera that could kill my run. That camera, that means it could clip. And the bike fell off the edge though. Nice camera! That's exactly what I like to see. I see everything right now. Turn the bike, go towards the cave, and go. Alright. Here.
And just like that, he successfully warped past the cutscene trigger, and now it was time for the hardest part of the trick, the map reload drop. Success, but he wasn't out of the woods yet. The ledge grab drop was known to be finicky, so he had to nail this part too. Another success. He was now massively ahead of world record pace. K3 early went well, and now it was time for the new gold bar skip. Fortunately, this trick is pretty easy, giving him an additional 3-minute boost ahead of world record pace. Then he pulled off the K4 early air swim, out of bounds navigation, detexturing glitch, and walked right into the K4 shrine. His health routing wasn't great, so it took him a long time to die from Tricky's flames for the ESW. Also, I never mentioned this, but there is a glitch where pausing clears invulnerability frames, allowing for taking extra damage quickly. Many runners abuse this to die faster than normal when needed. Now it was time to get camera lock storage. At the time, we didn't know the optimal strategy, so we were doing an unnecessarily convoluted setup, but he got the new trick, boosting him an additional 3 minutes ahead of world record by skipping the beacon event. During Cape Claw 3, Fuzziness hit a weird glitch. For some reason, the cannon wasn't working, so he had to save quit reload to fix it. I'll get back to this later, but for now, this was just an annoying time loss. He lost even more time to a strange lag spike that caused him to clip inside the Krazoa statue, messing up his air swim. However, everything went well the next time. Once he placed the spellstones, it was now time for cam lock escape. He messed up the setup the first time, but he got it the second time, deloading the fire gem and sharp claw doors entirely. For this run, we didn't know that we could reuse our camlock storage to bypass this cutscene yet, but for all future runs, we would be skipping this cutscene. All that was left was the New Walled City trick to skip the sun and moonstones. He pulled it off, pushing him even further ahead of world record pace.
GG! Woo! I would take it. Should have been a free 50 also, but whatever. Let's go! Hard work pays off. I'm so happy.
On January 24th, 2022, he finished with a time of 3 hours and 51 minutes, completely blowing past the sub 4-hour barrier. It's worth noting that Fuzziness was still pretty new to this game, and he needed to improve his overall execution. This may be hard to believe, but he actually lost over 15 minutes to poor fuel cell routing, poor movement, poor combat, and other minor mistakes. As I said before, in a game this long, these things really stack up. Before he got back to running, we investigated why the cannon was bugged. It turns out that the cannon is always bugged if you skip Cape Claw 2. Eventually, we learned that we could fix it by running into a specific corner on the way into Cape Claw. This would cause the cannon to unload and reload, fixing it. So, Fuzziness optimized the fuel cell routing and got back to the grind to improve his execution. Only a week after his previous run, he lowered the world record by an additional 7 minutes to 3 hours and 44 minutes, but he wasn't done.
Yes! Let's go! Let's go, dude! I'm so happy with this run. I'm so happy. Let's fucking go, dude. What a run.
On February 19th, 2022, he lowered the world record again to 3 hours and 37 minutes. At this point, getting world record without bike skip would be impossible. Celestial and Jub were both actively running now, so they had no choice but to learn the new trick, and the race was on. Jub and Celestial had the advantage of over 5 years experience running this game, so there was a good chance that they could quickly dethrone Fuzziness, who had only been running for a few months now. After practicing all the new tricks, Celestial got this run.
And that's about a 3-minute world record. Oh my goodness.
For the first time in over a year, Celestial managed to win back the world record, finishing with a time of 3 hours and 34 minutes. Any percent was finally starting to get optimized again. The only major mistake was a failed air swim during Cape Claw 3 that required a save quit reload to reattempt it. Both Celestial and Fuzziness had been getting mediocre Cloud Runner Fortress races and Dracor fights, so there was time to save there too. But before the world record could be improved, I discovered a new minor glitch in Ocean Force Point Temple 1 and 2. There is a puzzle in both versions that requires shooting fire blast shots at a block to guide it through a maze. I discovered that you could actually shoot it again while it was moving. With precise aim and well-timed shots, you could clip this puzzle block through walls, skipping a portion of the maze. As a result, both versions of this puzzle could be completed much faster, saving up to 20 seconds in the run. It's worth noting that doing it on the second version of the puzzle is much riskier and actually loses time if you miss the fire blast shot. But of course, we weren't done finding glitches. When messing around, I discovered a task trick where alternating shield and roll every frame would allow Fox to hover off the ground if he was on a downward slope. I then realized that we could interleave this with groundquake hovers to get out of bounds in Snowhorn Wastes. Soon afterwards, Lobster Zelda uploaded a task video where he was able to do the same thing, but he did it without using groundquake at all. After looking into it more, I realized that you could sort of do the trick in RTA. This is because you don't actually have to alternate the inputs every frame. You can get a hover by simply alternating with a specific cadence. I spent several hours trying the trick and concluded that it was impossible for a human to get enough height to make it up the ledge. Of course, when Fuzziness heard this, he had to try it for himself.
That doesn't work, though. Oh, shit!
Within 5 minutes, he managed to do the impossible, and then he did it again,
Oh shit.
and again.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
If done successfully in a run, this trick would save up to 3 minutes. This new out of bounds would allow us to perform a much faster version of Dark Ice Mines Early, which we will call Shield Hover Dark Ice Mines Early, or SH Dime. To give an idea of why this was so fast, take a look at the new route. We arrive from Ice Mountain, Shield Hover out of bounds, and walk along the edge of the map and drop right past the Snowhorn Gate. We rescue the gatekeeper and proceed to Thorntail. No more hypothermia swimming and no more backtracking from Thorntail. It was unclear if runners could get good enough at this trick to save any time in a run. It would need to be performed in under 3 minutes to save time over the existing Dark Ice Mine strategy. It was a big gamble, but Fuzziness decided to start trying runs with it. After a normal intro, it was time for the major reset point. The 3-minute clock started. Any longer than this and he would have no choice but to reset. A minute went by and still no luck. 30 seconds later and still nothing. But then something incredible happened. He landed the hover, saving over 1 minute and 30 seconds. From here, the stakes were much higher. He had to try and not lose this insane lead he just gained. Going into bike skip, the mammoth clip and out of bounds navigation were flawless. He handled the crazy camera section with no issues, moving through it at rapid pace. He nailed the run killer drop perfectly using a pause buffer strategy that he developed, and he landed the ledge grab drop. He golded his K3 early split, and amazingly, he got the quick kill in Cloud Runner Fortress, earning him a massive gold. K4 early went great, and he golded this split as well. He did so much damage to the final Spire and Dragon Rock that he almost destroyed it early. He had actually pulled this off in practice before, and it was previously considered to be a TAS-only strategy. And then, one of the clutchest moments of the speedrun happened.
Let's go! Let's go! I got that at least.
He got an insane, very early Room 1 Dracor kill, the fastest we've seen in any world record. Everything was going perfect at this point, but then Fuzziness got a streak of bad luck. He fell back in bounds during the Cape Claw 3 air swim, losing 30 seconds. He failed window jump, losing another 30. He earned some of this time back by using the new maze puzzle block clip, although he opted to skip the riskier version on the second variant of this puzzle. He then lost a bit of time by missing a cycle on the colored flame puzzle. He cam-locked his way back to Thorntail and had no issues with the new walled city tricks. From here, the hard parts of the run were behind him and he just needed to finish out the run.
Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Yes, world record on the last run. I'm so satisfied. Ah, good run apart from the end game. Really good run until Ocean Point.
And on March 12, 2022, Fuzziness set a new world record with a time of 3 hours and 31 minutes. Fuzziness had done it again. He raised the standards for any percent. It was clear, if you wanted a world record, you were doing bike skip and you were doing shield hovers. This was very demoralizing to most runners. This is because this trick causes actual physical pain from the repeated stressful hand movements. Just take a look at the hand cam video of Jub Jub demonstrating the shield hover. But eventually, all top runners implemented the hovers into their personal best runs. With all runners having now mastered the hover, the race for sub 330 was on. Fortunately, a new minor time save was discovered that would make this race just a little bit easier. Lobster Zelda noticed that when making the task, that the electric grid puzzle was behaving strangely. During Ocean Force Point Temple 2, the password for the tile puzzle was set to 1, 2, 3. Only the first 3 tiles were activated instead of the usual 9. This was also true in BDQR's task. The password was set to 1, 2, 3. I started looking into it and I found the root cause. Allow me to demonstrate the bug. Did you see it? I thought not. It turns out that due to a developer oversight, if the camera leaves the map and re-enters, for some inexplicable reason, the password resets to just 123. Apparently, the password for Ocean Force Point Temple 2 just always ends up defaulting to this. This entire time, we were making the game harder by stepping on the switch, which was overriding the default password. Of course, now that we know how it works, we do it intentionally during both sections. This trick came to be known as the electric slide and saves about 30 seconds by cutting out memorization and RNG. So who would take advantage of this new time save and be the first runner to get sub 330? Fuzziness, Celestial, and Jub all had a serious shot at crossing the barrier. However, it would end up being none of these runners. Plot twist, I would be the one to get sub 330. Not by 1 minute, not by 2 minutes, not by 5, 10, 15, 30, not by an hour, no, by nearly 2 hours, with a final time of 1 hour and 47 minutes, followed by a run of 1 hour and 38 minutes on the same day. So what on earth happened? Did I find a way to collect K6 early from the cage in Krazoa Palace? Nope, to this day we have never figured out K6 early, but I found the next best thing. To understand how I pulled off the greatest world record heist of all time, we are going to need to back up quite a bit, and with that, I introduce you to the Void Travel Era. This journey began back in May of 2021 when Reina shared an interesting fact. The entire map of Star Fox Adventures is connected, and when I say the entire map, I mean the entire map. Even the areas that we thought were behind loading screens, such as the dungeons, Krazoa shrines, boss rooms, and so on. These maps are separated by out-of-bounds space that we refer to as the Void. The obvious thought is to try using an airswim to travel through the Void to access some maps early. Sadly, this doesn't work, because as I've mentioned, the game has a mechanic where if Fox comes into contact with the Void, Fox stops moving and the game is soft-locked. In other words, swimming through the Void was impossible. Now obviously you have probably guessed that we figured out some method of traveling through the Void, but the method that we found was by no means obvious and the journey was not easy. First, we must understand the world map a bit more. It contains 5 grids and you can think of these as parallel universes that occupy the same space. Allow me to demonstrate this with an air swim. There is a trigger in Thorntail Hollow that is used to change grids. We can see that by moving through it, we can go from the shop grid, which is grid +1, to the normal grid, which is grid 0. By passing through it again, we switch to grid -1, which contains the underground well. In fact, when we ride the bike from Dark Ice Mine's exterior to the interior, we hit triggers to swap through grid 0, -1, and -2. Grid -2 stood out to me as incredibly interesting. This grid contains only 2 areas, Dark Ice Mine's interior and the first boss map. One detail stuck out to me, and that there was no void separating them, at least according to this map. Using Bike Skip, we can already get out of bounds on this map, so I had an idea. What if we did the map reload drop directly into the boss room instead of dropping onto the difficult platforms? Crazy enough, this idea worked, but it was a soft lock since we are now stuck on the bike with no way to fix it. Plus, it wouldn't save that much time even if it did work. The glitch in of itself wasn't super useful, but when testing it, I noticed something really strange. I missed the boss room and continued to ride my bike into the Void. Normally when entering the Void on a mount, the game crashes because the mount Fox is riding unloads. However, this Dark Ice Mine's bike was special. This bike was intended to be taken across 3 different grids, so the developers gave this bike special properties to prevent it from being unloaded when leaving previous maps. In other words, this bike seemed to have special properties allowing it to travel through the Void without crashing. This gave me another idea. On grid -1, right next to the mine shaft connecting Dark Ice Mine's exterior and interior, there is the unfinished Dragon Rock bottom map that never made it into the final version of the game. Reverse engineers already proved that if you could get this map to load, then you could easily get into the Dracor fight directly from this deleted level. This would have been a massive sequence break, but frustratingly, when I tested it, entering this map caused a crash due to a misconfigured light pole. Otherwise, it might have worked. This was a frustrating frustrating dead end. It would have been so cool glitching into a deleted level to beat the game faster, but no luck. Trying to ride our bike to any other map was also useless because the bike is in constant freefall. In other words, we could actually ride our bike into any map on grid 0, -1, or -2, but we would be too far below them to actually do anything. Some of these would even activate glitchy events like re-triggering the intro auto-scroller or starting the King Red-Eye boss fight, but neither of these are useful since the detextured state turns them into soft locks. But then I had a crazy idea. Since Fox could travel through the void while mounted, what if Fox was dismounted via the dismount glitch? This crazy idea actually worked. The crazier part is that this version of the glitch worked on any mount in the game, including the mounts that unload when you leave the map. So I tried an even crazier idea. I combined this with a very difficult air swim in Dark Ice Mines using the first mammoth to get out of bounds. I was now able to freely swim through the void without soft locking or crashing. Using this glitch, we could swim directly from Dark Ice Mines, the first dungeon, to Dragon Rock, the final dungeon. This sounds like it would be a massive sequence break, but there was one major problem. Fox couldn't do anything, and I mean absolutely anything. We can still do basic interactions, but we can't hit triggers and we can't activate cutscenes. And if we save quit reload, we just end up back in Dark Ice Mines. Most interactions just result in a crash, such as trying to talk to NPCs or feeding Tricky. So this was a dead end. However, I was optimistic that one day we would find a way to use this glitch. So I started looking into ways that we could set up a void travel on other mounts in the game. I was particularly interested in the Ice Mountain Bike because this is the first mount we encounter in the run. If we were going to find a sequence break, we would probably want to do it with this bike. Before we go further, let's do a quick breakdown of Ice Mountain. After a short intro as Fox, the Warpstone sends us to Ice Mountain. Upon arrival, we watch some intro cutscenes and kill 2 enemies to reveal a switch. Shooting this switch opens the gate and entering triggers another cutscene. After this cutscene, we are forced onto a bike and race down the entire mountain against 2 Sharpclaws in order to rescue Tricky and obtain him as a companion. Fortunately, Glitch Hunters BVQR and Glitches and Stuff had already found a few interesting things in Ice Mountain. There is a cannon that constantly shoots at Fox when he is within range. In 2017, Glitches and Stuff found that we could manipulate this cannon into hitting us at just the right time while carrying an explosive barrel. If timed just right, Fox drops this barrel and the collision sphere it creates is enough to push us through the fence. This only works in version 1.0 of the game because in 1.1 they removed this collision sphere. This trick came to be known as either explosive barrel clip or cannon clip. Next, Glitches and Stuff found that once out of bounds, we could perform an extremely precise drop into a cave. It's worth noting that at the time, this drop was considered to be TAS only due to how precise it was. Once out of bounds, Glitches and Stuff showed that we could walk along the edge of the map to access the bike early without starting the race. From here, we can drive into a fuel cell to activate the dismount glitch, as long as it was the first fuel cell that we've ever collected. There was one problem though. If we choose not to open the gate, we would be softlocked behind it. However, if we open the gate first, for some reason a different version of the bike spawns that is not interactable. In other words, there was no obvious way to get dismount glitch and escape the cave. It's also important to note that in 2017, BVQR found that if we use barrel clip to get out of bounds, we could fall into some water at the bottom of Ice Mountain to start an air swim. I could see all of the puzzle pieces here. There was a bike, a way to activate dismount glitch, and a place to start an air swim, all of the necessary ingredients for a void travel. So I got to testing. Eventually I discovered something strange. There is a memory address that controls the cutscene state of the bike. We can see that if we start the race normally, this value changes frequently as the cutscene progresses, eventually becoming a value of 110 once the race fully starts. If we save quit reload, it goes back to 0. Then if we hop on the bike again, we see that the value flips from 6 to 38 to 102 and finally to 110 again, and the race begins. This is where things get weird. If we perform the explosive barrel clip and get out of bounds, then approach this bike before watching the cutscene, the bike flag gets set to 4 at the wrong time. This flag is stored in high flags, so the only way to persist this value is to backtrack and hit a save trigger. Now after starting the cutscene and race and save quit reloading, the bike flag is still set to 4 when it should be 0. As a side effect, for some unknown reason, the race cutscene no longer starts. This means we can now ride our bike in an area that we were never meant to. As a result, we can now activate the dismount glitch by riding this bike into a fuel cell, allowing us to escape the cave while maintaining our dismounted state. Then, for some reason, zooming into first-person mode in this state causes the map to reload. This allows for us to clip through a wall and drop down, similar to the map reload drop in Dark-X Mines. We then start our air swim, and thanks to the dismount state, we now head away to void travel. After over 5 minutes of swimming in precise directions, we eventually end up at the 5th Krazoa Shrine. By sheer luck, the ice mountain water is the perfect height to do a water plane transfer into the final room of the 5th Krazoa Shrine. Amazingly, we wouldn't even need Freeze Blast anymore for the fires, because we would skip that room entirely. However, as you know, we have the same problem that we can't hit triggers, and talking to the Krazoa spirit would crash the game. If we could somehow collect the spirit without crashing, it would cut more than 2 hours from the game. But for now, void traveling was still a dead end, but at least we had a strategy in mind if we could ever bypass the crashes. After trying nearly every idea I could think of, I eventually gave up on void traveling and went back to looking for simpler glitches. I was cataloging triggers in the game so that I could learn what each trigger did. To test this, I took advantage of the fact that Fox can't hit triggers when he is mounted. Using hacks, I would manually set Fox's mount pointer to some random data. This would allow me to pass through triggers without triggering them because the game would think I was mounted, or at least that is what was supposed to happen. One day, I set Fox's mount pointer to the Fox object. This caused the game to think that Fox was mounting himself. I wasn't trying to be funny or clever, I just pasted a random address from my clipboard, which happened to be the address of the Fox object. After I did this, something strange happened. Fox regained his ability to hit triggers. I was absolutely perplexed, but moments later, I realized this could only mean one thing, and it was massive. Normally, the game checks Fox's coordinates to see if he passes through a trigger. When mounted, instead of checking Fox's coordinates, the game checks the mount coordinates. This is also true when using the dismount glitch. The mount coordinates are checked instead of Fox's coordinates, as long as the camera is near the bike, like we've seen with camlock and bike skip. By using hacks to set Fox's mount to himself, the game thought that he was his own mount, so the check passed. Another way to look at this is that every frame the game checks the mount's previous coordinates and compares them to the new coordinates to see if they form a line intersecting any nearby triggers. If so, the trigger activates. If we could get another object or some random data to overwrite the unloaded bike, we could potentially hit triggers again. Basically, we needed to figure out how to pull off stale reference manipulation or SRM in Star Fox Adventures. Thankfully, Reina had already reverse engineered Star Fox Adventures memory system. So I ported Reina's Python scripts over to C#, creating a memory visualizer to help find a manipulation. It took a long time, but eventually I pulled off this result. I proved that a task could get a Fire Blast shot to overwrite our unloaded mount memory. This would cause the game to think that the Fire Blast shot was our mount. As a result, the game was now checking the Fire Blast coordinates for activating triggers, so when the shot passed through the respawn checkpoint, it activated. At this point, all we had to do was jump down into the pit below and die. When we respawned, we would now be at the end of the K5 shrine, and the game would be in a fixed state. This was a massive discovery because it proved that K5E was possible, saving over 2 hours on the task route. There was still one major problem. After collecting the 5th Krazoa spirit, we just fall through the floor and appear to be in a soft lock. We can't pause, so we can't save quit to fix it either. The reason this happens is because our companion Tricky is supposed to be in this cutscene, but we never unlocked him in this route. Normally, the cutscene takes control of all the needed characters and disables collision and menuing, but in this case, the game panics while waiting for Tricky to show up. Fortunately, we have a few tricks up our sleeve. First, we can stop ourselves from falling too far by either swinging our staff or zooming into first person. This glitch was actually first documented by Jub in 2016, who unsuccessfully tried to use this technique to get K4 early. With the help of the map viewer developed by Reyna, we can see how this trick works. Each map is split up into a grid of cells. These cells are contained by 3D rectangular boundaries. Within these boundaries, gravity is enabled. Now apparently Newton's law of motion applies here. An object in motion stays in motion. So even though there is no gravity outside of these boundaries, we continue to fall. However, if we zoom into first person or swing our staff, these actions reset our gravity and vertical speed to 0. And as long as we stay out of these block boundaries, gravity never starts again. So just to be absolutely clear, our height is locked in place, but walking into another boundary will cause us to fall again. In this state, we are actually still able to hit triggers. This is where we need to get creative. There is only one loaded death trigger on the entire map, and it's in the first room of the Moon Temple. We can easily jump into this pit and die, but we would respawn all the way back before K5. Another strategy is to hit a nearby save trigger and then jump into the death trigger, but this would just soft lock us inside the temple. In theory, we could ESW out, but we can do better than this. Using Reyna's map viewer, I found a better trigger that seemed promising. Deeper in the Sun Temple, there was an active respawn trigger at the back of the room. If we run into the trigger, we can hit it really easily, but frustratingly, the death plane below is not loaded, so we just continue to fall. Even if we cancel our gravity again, Fox will end up too low to be able to hit the death plane in the Moonstone Temple. We needed to somehow hit this respawn trigger without losing too much height. It turns out that there is a timing window of just a few frames where Fox can just barely roll into the temple, hit the respawn checkpoint, roll back out, and reset gravity before losing too much height. If done perfectly, Fox would have just barely enough height to die in the Moon Temple. The cool part is once we die and respawn, we can actually save quit reload all the way back to Ice Mountain. This is because both the Sun Temple and the 5th Krazoa Shrine triggers were respawn checkpoints, not save checkpoints. This is incredibly convenient because from here we simply warp back to Thorntail, fly to Krazoa Palace, turn in K5, collect and turn in K6, and beat Andros. This new route skips every dungeon, every spellstone, 3 of the 6 Krazoa spirits, obtaining Tricky, and every ability except Fire Blast. This route skips so much content that it's actually faster to list the stuff that we collect rather than the stuff we skip. The entire route is as follows. We of course collect the first Krazoa spirit as part of the intro. After respawning as Fox, we collect the staff and the Fire Blast ability. After save warping out, we grab 10 scarabs to buy the rock candy. We grab 1 bomb spore to reveal the path to the warp stone, give him the rock candy, and warp to Ice Mountain. From here we open the gate, do bike flag glitch, and start the race. After save quitting, we reset our console and begin the stale reference manipulation setup. Next we drop down and start our air swim in the water at the bottom of Ice Mountain. We have to be careful to avoid Cape Claw because a quirk of void traveling is that we can only load 1 map, after which future maps stop loading. We then enter the K5 Shrine and use SRM to respawn in the final hallway. We then do a short puzzle, which is supposed to quiz us on all of the stuff we did in the run by matching objects to locations, which is hilarious because we have never actually stepped foot in a single one of these areas, nor collected any of these objects. Once done, we get warped to Walled City where we perform the Walled City escape and save warp back to Ice Mountain. Next, we take the warp pad to Thorntail Hollow and take the R-Wing to Krazoa Palace and do the outro of the game. Remember that 27-page PDF I made of the route? This new route reduced it down to 6 pages. As you may have predicted, Fuzziness was very interested in knowing whether this could be done RTA. Fuzziness had already proven that 2 different task tricks were in fact RTA viable, and so he was looking to add a third. We just needed to solve 3 problems. First, the precise drop into the Ice Mountain's cave from out of bounds. So I put out a bounty for a reliable setup. Eventually, a glitch hunter named LavaFang407 found one, and Fuzziness improved it further. Second, we needed a better setup for the Walled City escape, but more on this later. Finally, we needed a way for a human to pull off the stale reference manipulation. Using the memory visualizer tool, Fuzziness and I tried hundreds of routes looking for one that worked. After weeks of trial and error, I eventually found a setup that was roughly 80% consistent. consistent. After performing the bike flag glitch and starting the race, we would reset our console and follow a very specific movement pattern all the way to the 5th Krazoa Shrine. Fuzziness found improvements to some of my strats, and eventually the setup was about 90% consistent. Also, Fuzziness found a way to make Walled City slightly less terrible. During the Sun Temple checkpoint section, Fuzziness found that by mixing in staff swings after rolling, we can slow down gravity to increase the chances that we escape with a good enough height. This made the trick ever so slightly more viable for a human, but it's still incredibly difficult. And with that, we finally had all the pieces we needed to implement this in a run. Around this time, I had also been developing an easier route. This route cleverly uses 2 files and event storage warps to bypass the Walled City problem. In theory, we could use SRM to activate the K5 ESW trigger and warp to K5 using a file that has Tricky unlocked. I wasn't 100% sure if this was going to work, but I knew Fuzziness was going to get the world record soon, so I gave it a shot. I got to Ice Mountain and the run really begins here. Cannon Clip took me 2 tries. I got the difficult seam drop, but it took me forever to set it up. After Bike Flag Glitch, it was time for me to switch to the second file so that I could do the easy route with ESWs. This route is incredibly complicated, so I'm not going to go into it. Just know that it actually requires doing Dark Ice Mines early on the second file, which I failed 3 times. However, once I got to Dark Ice Mines, it was time to switch back to the Ice Mountain file and do the stale reference manipulation. Everything seemed to be going well. I got the dismount, the out of bounds clip, the drop into the water, and I started the void travel. After a long and precise swim, I entered K5 in the correct spot. Too far to the left or right actually ruins the SRM. After reloading the map as part of our SRM setup, I clipped back in bounds and fired off the fire blast shots. Now for the moment of truth. If I respawn in Ice Mountain, the SRM failed. If I respawn in K5, then it worked. And success! The very first SRM ever seen in a run. This route was still untested, so it was time to find out if Walled City was fixed. Let's find out, so do whatever the math is here. Haha! I did it! It's the R-Wing causing the void, because Tricky gets out of the R-Wing, and so that's technically part of the cutscene. And so because Tricky isn't there, it doesn't know what to do for this cutscene where he gets out of the bottom. So the game voids. And on June 19th, 2022, I cheesed a new world record with a time of 1 hour and 47 minutes. Later that night, I improved it again to 1 hour and 38 minutes, and I cleaned up some of the major mistakes, but it was still a pretty bad run. I knew this record wasn't going to stand, but I saw the opportunity to insert myself into the world record history, so I went for it. And good thing I did, because merely 20 hours later, Fuzziness got this run. Cannon Clip, first try. Seam Drop, also first try. He had no issues with the very first part of the SRM, clipping out of bounds, and starting the air swim. Now it was time for the void travel, and hilariously, he played Minesweeper to pass the time during the long swim. He entered the K5 shrine at the correct spot, so things were looking good.
It's slow.
And he got it, but the hardest part still remained: Walled City escape.
I might have pressed A too late.
A few things can happen from here. If he is too low, he can't die in the Moon Temple pit. However, even if he does die, if he missed the Sun Temple respawn trigger, he would just respawn back in K5.
Let's fucking go! Let's go! Let's go! Finally! There it is! There it is, chat. Let's go. The first sub 1 incoming, unless I fuck up Andros.
He got it and was now on pace for a 55-minute run, well under an hour. Going into Andros, Fuzziness was not used to having 3 hearts. Normally we go into this fight with 7. This is because collecting spell stones normally increases our max health, but in this run we skip all of them. This actually makes Andros a very difficult fight because we need to deal enough damage to advance his phases quickly while also dodging the meteors, spaceships, energy rings, and his physical attacks. Normally we just tank that damage, but with the new route, that wasn't an option. So sadly, Fuzziness ended up dying 3 times, but the 4th time he got the kill, and on June 20th, 2022, Fuzziness set a world record of 1 hour and 7 minutes. This was not the sub-hour run that he wanted, so the next day he got back to the grind. Everything went similar to before. No issues with Cannon Clip, Seam Drop, or the SRM. K5E and Walled City Escape were a success. Now it was time to clean up his Andros. Frustratingly, he died yet again, but this time it only happened once, so he was able to close out the run with a final time of 56 minutes, the first ever sub-hour run. Nobody ever thought that this game would see times this low, so this was a huge milestone for the community. However, Fuzziness was tired of losing good runs to Andros, so he started practicing. To do this, he started grinding the New Game Plus category because it's very similar to any percent and also fights Andros with 3 hearts. After getting the New Game Plus world record, Fuzziness felt comfortable returning to any percent. 2 weeks after his world record, he got this run.
Let's go! I got it, chat. I got it. I'm so happy. Oh, I late split. It's like a 52, I think. I got it! I'm so happy.
And on July 3rd, 2022, Fuzziness lowered the world record again to 54 minutes and 52 seconds. This new world record was incredibly optimized and would be very difficult to beat. This was supposed to be the end of the journey. Fuzziness's world record has stood for over 2 years at this point. However, when I started working on this video, several community members wanted to see if they could make it into the final cut. At the time of this recording, 3 additional runners eventually learned the new route: Celestial, a new runner named Goal 314, and Ketsumomo, a new Japanese runner. Each one of these runners had personal best times within 2 minutes of world record, so it was only a matter of time until someone got a good run. Additionally, Goal 314 found that cutting the corners tighter during the void travel could save 20 seconds. Goal also started performing an even harder version of Walled City where we avoid reobtaining L targeting. I never explained this, but Fox loses his ability to L target during the cutscene glitch, but by moving the camera out of bounds, for some reason this restores Fox's ability to L target. This makes lineups easier, but it loses time. Fuzziness did this in his world record, so to compete against him, runners were now skipping this. Using this trick meant they would lose more runs, but eventually Goal 314 got this run. And on July 10th, 2024, Goal set a new world record with a time of 54 minutes and 1 second, a 51-second improvement. With a time this close to sub 54, runners were eager to cross the minute barrier and see the first ever 53-minute run. Additionally, Ketsumomo found a new trick that is both RNG and frame perfect. Sometimes when arriving in Krazoa Palace, you can roll on the same frame as gaining control into the explosive barrel pad. This causes the arrival dialogue to overlap with the barrel dialogue, saving roughly 2 seconds. However, missing the trick can put the jellyfish enemies on a bad cycle, so only some runners go for it. The new record also got the attention of Fuzziness, and he decided to come back to the grind, this time incorporating all of Goal's new strategies. Fuzziness was incredibly rusty at this point, and he had to relearn the entire route. He had to go back to the drawing board, and he started finding new setups to help make the tricks more consistent. First, he found that pause buffering the control stick to the left while dropping helps make the seam drop more lenient. Additionally, he was doing a greedier version of K5 early where he avoids L targeting when loading the map, saving 5 seconds or so. This increases the odds that the memory manipulation fails, which means that more runs can accidentally die here. This didn't deter him, and he kept grinding.
Let's go! Yes, dude! There we go. I played it correctly. This run is 1 minute and 20 faster than my old PB. That's insane. That's actually insane how much faster this is.
With the new world record set at 53 minutes and 24 seconds, there was very little time left to save. This insanely low time meant that runners had no choice but to play even greedier and make no minor mistakes. Fuzziness was content with what he had accomplished, and he took a break. However, Ketsumomo was still grinding. After losing many runs, eventually he got a run that looked promising. Going into K5, he was 15 seconds ahead of world record pace. He got a fast walled city escape and just needed to survive Andros. And right when he was about to get the world record, Andros entered into an unwanted third phase, and Ketsumomo's hopes of world record ended on the spot. Had he gotten the last 1 or 2 shots, he would have beaten the world record by 2 seconds. However, Ketsumomo didn't give up, and he got a similar run on the next day. He made one major mistake, missing his first attempt at the explosive barrel clip, which cost him 10 seconds, but he was still ahead of world record pace. He was able to maintain this pace going into Andros and was nearly on par with the world record run, so this was going to be a close one.
果たしてどうなんでしょうね。
Miraculously, he managed to clutch out a world record by mere milliseconds. On September 8th, 2024, Ketsumomo set a new world record of 53 minutes and 23 seconds. A week later, he fixed the mistake he made and lowered the record by an additional 7 seconds. 3 weeks after this, he was able to grind the record down to 53 minutes and 8 seconds. The next goal was obvious. Ketsumomo had his sights on crossing the minute barrier and getting sub 53.
Yes! 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 Oh.
The grind was over. Ketsumomo got the first ever sub 53, finishing with a time of 52 minutes and 56 seconds, a massive 12-second improvement. This is where the record stands today. So is this the end of Star Fox Adventures? Beating this record is going to be incredibly difficult. There isn't really that much time left to save, although it may be possible with early hands. Additionally, there is actually a time save that runners have not been able to use. I discovered that we could skip opening the cave door entirely by using a zoom clip in a fairly precise location. This would allow us to clip through the door while remaining out of bounds, allowing us to start a void travel without ever having opened the door. This could save up to 2 minutes. It would skip killing the enemies, skip bike flag glitch, and skip the race cutscene, but sadly it would require us to find a brand new SRM setup. Some community members are actively looking for a setup, but it's basically a trial and error process, so it may take a while. There is also one other glitch that looks promising. The holy grail of Star Fox Adventures glitch hunting has always been clipping into the cage at the top of Krazoa Palace to collect K6 early. The cool part is that if we somehow found a way to do this, we wouldn't need a way to clip back out. For some unknown reason, if we collect K6 early, a glitched R-Wing arrival cutscene would play that would warp us out of the cage. This cutscene normally plays when arriving after collecting K5, but for some reason it would play now. Here's the crazy part, we actually already know how to clip into the cage, but with a major problem. You see, Ice Mountain just so happens to loom over Krazoa Palace. It is actually possible, at least for the task, to control the bike while the fuel cell dialogue is open. Because of this, we can blindly navigate the bike to Krazoa Palace. The fuel cell dialogue prevents the bike from unloading temporarily. We can then cancel the dialogue at just the right moment to travel through the void and fall into the Krazoa Palace map. In other words, we can void travel to Krazoa Palace without using an air swim. As a result, Krazoa Palace is now detextured, and the collision for the cage leading to the 6th Krazoa Spirit is gone. However, since we still have a stale reference to the unloaded bike, attempting to warp to the Krazoa Shrine causes the game to crash. There is no save trigger inside the cage either, so we can't use SRM to respawn inside the cage. If we found a way to make this work, it would save an additional 10 minutes over the current route. For now, Krazoa 6 early is out of reach. Perhaps someday a new discovery will be made to continue the journey that myself and many others started. But even if this is where it ends, I'm happy with where we've gotten. I hope you've enjoyed the history of Star Fox Adventures speedrunning. Thanks for watching, and take care.